Chapter 26. One person slaughtered more than 200 gunmen in a short period of time. This is not an ordinary danger. Does he have any special ability? Professor? Why do you care so much about him? Qin looked at the professor. There is a very huge energy hidden in his body, and this energy is growing rapidly every moment, which makes me feel heart palpitations. Charles's face became serious. He is an alien that I have never seen before, a person who is not a mutant, but he has given birth to such incredible energy, and his character is too extreme. Once he steps into the darkness, he will be nothing to this world. A huge amount of threat. It's also an unimaginable disaster. Charles was not groundless, he was indeed a little worried. An executioner who massacred 500 people, even if he could avoid hurting innocent people now, who could guarantee that he wouldn't in the future? Being addicted to killing, it is easy to sink into it originally. What's more, the endless growth of power will also bring about personality distortion, pride, arrogance, and self-confidence as an omnipotent god. He has seen too many such people. But compared with people like Bai Xiao, the gap is huge. At least in Charles's own perception, the most dangerous person, Bai Xiao, may occupy a high position, which his old friend Eric may not be able to compare with. Superior. At the very least, Eric needs a helmet to protect him from the intrusion of his psychic powers. This one doesn't need a helmet. His originally powerful mind is extremely powerful and can resist his spiritual power. Do you think we will become enemies with these brats? Logan said bluntly. There is no predicting the future, Logan. Charles shook his head. We don't know him, but we need to keep enough attention to him. Then I advise you not to do this, Professor. After Charles finished speaking, Logan looked at Charles with deep meaning. He is a beast, and a calm beast is also a beast. When you think he is in danger, it means that subconsciously you have regarded him as an enemy. Then he will show his sharp claws and fangs unceremoniously. Logan's words surprised everyone present. Scott looked at Logan and said politely, when will the wolf have the wisdom to say this? Or are you the same kind? Scott. Qin frowned, very dissatisfied with her boyfriend's offensive words. Logan was their companion no matter what, and such words were tantamount to humiliation for his companions. Boy, if you feel dissatisfied, you can try to anger a beast. Maybe you will see with your own eyes how the beast will tear your body apart. Logan took 2 steps and stood in front of Scott, facing him face to face and speaking in a low voice. Logan, who is so ambitious, just has it written on his face that I want to kill you. He had never had a good impression of Scott, his love rival. Scott didn't have the slightest fear, he just pushed against Logan like 2 bulls in heat. Storm looked at him, and Beast couldn't help but shake his head. Everyone was used to this kind of scene. The professor over there interrupted the 2 men's bullfighting. Maybe you are right, Logan, we always hope to lead to good. Maybe we shouldn't be on guard against him, just let us wait silently. Time may give us the answer. Logan raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the professor. At the moment, the professor also picked up the book in his hand, which wrote about the origin of good and evil. Natasha Romanoff has left, and Bai Xiao has already begun preparing for his next move. Before taking action, he needs to develop another ability of his own. The use of psychic powers. If psychic power can be developed to the greatest extent, it will obviously be able to make up for another shortcoming of Bai Xiao. The master of psychic power is undoubtedly Professor X. His psychic powers are also unique in the entire planet. White Queen is much worse than this old guy, especially since the other party also has a device that can increase psychic power. If the other party wears that thing, it will also pose a huge amount of threat to Bai Xiao. Bai Xiao didn't like this kind of threat, so after experiencing the collision with Professor X in Chinatown, he started developing psychic powers without stopping. His psychic power is very strong, and psychic power is an extension of his willpower. The stronger the will, the stronger the spiritual power. For example, Captain America Steve Rogers does not know how to use psychic powers, but his will is so strong that ordinary psychic power users cannot control him. It's just that he has no way to transform and extend this kind of spiritual power to use it. Bai Xiao is different from freaks like Rogers, who are born with amazing willpower. He is another kind of freak. The advantage of life essence lies in comprehensive strengthening, which includes psychic power. In addition, after ability awakening, he can master this power instantly. But it is limited to use, and some fine control is not enough. You have to develop it yourself in depth and extend this power. However, compared to magic power, the development of the mind is much simpler. As long as there are enough test subjects, he will soon be able to develop many abilities. As for guinea pigs, New York doesn't need many of them. He randomly found a few gang members and dragged them to a no-man's land, and Xiao started experimenting on these test subjects. With the simplest method of reading memories, he used his spiritual power to invade the brains of these ordinary people and began a journey of reading memories. In other people's brains, he was like a god controlling the memories of these people, like a slideshow. The pictures kept flashing by, and he seemed to have mastered the forward and backward buttons. By pulling forward and rewinding at will, the memory information of these people can be read at will. In addition, they are gradually using spiritual power to create monsters in the brains of these people, such as creating a spiritual cage, creating an illusory spiritual world, and throwing them into it. All of these require sufficient mastery of psychic power, and then gradually develop a series of derivative abilities such as psychic storms and psychic bombs. The final result is to make these people brain dead, and their deaths are a bit miserable. Xiao finally mercifully burned the bodies of these guys to ashes. Chapter 27. In the final stage, Xiao built 3 layers of spiritual defense for his own mind. This line of defense of spiritual power is specifically designed to protect one's own spiritual world from being invaded. No matter what the occasion, he must ensure that his brain is safe, just in case. At the very least, even if someone at the level of a future psychic master confronts him, he will not be invaded mentally. The only shortcoming is that Xiao feels that the 3 layers of psychic defense are not enough. However, although his psychic power is strong, it is already the limit of what he can achieve. In the future, after strengthening, his psychic power will increase, and he may be able to build more solid, more defensive lines. Let Xiao feel that the final shortcoming has been made up for. He also plans to take next action, and the target is not vampires and werewolves, but William Stryker, whom he initially thought. One is to kill this pervert so that he can be psychologically satisfied, get some adamantium to see if he can build the weapon he wants, and see if he can get some money from this guy. After all, his assets are really not enough. He needs money to rent or buy a house in various districts of New York. The biggest problem now is to find William Stryker's base first. It has to be said that since his mind strengthened, he looked back on his memory and found out some memories that had been forgotten in corners. It just so happened that he also found out the detailed address of Stryker's base. Lake Alkali in Alberta, Canada. In fact, even if you don't know, it's not particularly difficult to find out, it just takes a little time. Hasn't the path to spiritual power been revealed? Fortunately, he has permanent residency and does not need a visa to go to Canada, so he went to New York Airport to buy a ticket to Canada. It just so happened that there was a plane bound for Alberta, Canada in an hour. After waiting for an hour, he got on the plane. There was no bloody hijacking incident on the plane. In fact, even if there was one, he would be pushed down if he exerted a wave of psychic power. He did not want any trouble to occur during his journey. 6 hours later, the plane arrived in Alberta. Lake Alkali is located in Alberta. Surrounded by the lake and mountains, the base is well hidden. After getting off the car, he went to a car rental company. It can only be said that car rental companies in this era, especially in Alberta, do not care whether you have a driver's license or not, as long as you have a sufficient deposit, even if you are a 10-year-old child. Rent. After renting a Ford SUV and purchasing a map, we headed to Lake Alkali. Driving along the road, the scenery on both sides of the road becomes better as we head towards Alkali Lake. There are almost no people coming here. As time goes by, at the moment is approaching evening. Just on the edge of Lake Alkali Road, Xiao stopped the car, opened the door and walked out. When he came to the edge of the road, his leeward resembled a cliff. Under the cliff was the river, and upstream of the river stood a huge amount of dam. Xiao looked towards the dam ahead with his sharp vision. With his super senses, he could perceive the dense atmosphere inside the dam even though he was thousands of meters away. Apparently, he found the right place. William Stryker's base was built in the dam. If you want to enter, you can only enter and exit through the flood discharge pipe of the dam. However, the pipes are all monitored. If you break in, the other party will surely release the flood and engulf the intruder. His psychic power is powerful enough, but in order to prevent Professor within the base. But, no matter what, Xiao doesn't want to waste time here. So with a boom, the ground beneath Bai Xiao's feet cracked. He suddenly shot straight into the sky and dived towards the dam at an astonishing speed. Bai Xiao's whole body was like a meteorite falling from the densest place inside the dam. Boom! I saw the hard dam exploding like foam, smashing layers of cement and steel bars and smashing them in. In the bottom base of the dam, the soldiers were still patrolling with weapons in hand as usual, carrying out today's work, but no one expected that the ceiling above would suddenly shatter, and a figure would fall down with gravel and smoke. The rising air waves swept across all directions. The surrounding patrolling soldiers, as well as several passing experimental researchers in white coats, were blown away by the air waves, and were either smashed against the walls or instruments, and screams continued to resound through the base. A few unlucky ones even died on the spot after being hit on the head. At the same time, an alarm suddenly sounded inside the base, and the warning lights hanging on the walls changed to red and began to flash. The base was suddenly attacked, and everyone inside reacted immediately. The soldiers in the surveillance room also reacted quickly. They found the location of the accident from the computer surveillance screen in front of them, and immediately picked up the communicator and started yelling. "Attention all soldiers, the base has been invaded, the base has been invaded, the enemy is in the 7th area, the enemy is in the 7th area. Go immediately and kill the enemy." At this time, there was a sound of footsteps outside the metal gate, and a slightly older middle-aged man wearing a black sweater and glasses hurriedly walked in with a few soldiers. "What happened?" "Sir, an enemy invaded the base from above the dam, and someone broke through the dam." The operator clicked a few times on the keyboard and saw that the plan map of the dam base showed a red line from the top of the dam to the base, showing the officially damaged area. "How many enemies are there?" There's only one." The operator pointed at the monitor. Chapter 28. Walter? Are you kidding me? One person can smash through 150 meters of concrete and steel? Is he Superman? The middle-aged man didn't believe it at all. "Sir, that may be the case," the operator replied with a bitter tone. The middle-aged man took a deep breath and looked at the multi-directional surveillance screen of the 7th area. In the dust and smoke, a figure was looming. "Damn it, is it those damn freaks?" He cursed in a low voice, his words filled with discrimination and hatred. "And he is also the master who built this base, William Stryker." Stryker saw from the screen that his soldiers had gradually surrounded the 7th area. His eyes behind his glasses flickered and he looked at the expressionless black-haired Asian woman wearing a black leather jacket next to him. "Come with me." After finishing speaking, he took the Asian woman and several heavily armed soldiers out of the monitoring control room. He hurriedly walked towards the 7th area. But at the moment, in the 7th area, the battle had already begun. It was a battle, let alone a one-sided massacre. There were many soldiers surrounding him, about 60 or 70, each of them carrying a gun, including M4 carbines and other powerful guns. Facing the incoming Bai Xiao, these soldiers coldly pulled the triggers, and the bullets formed a crisscrossing net, enough to sift through anyone. But what frightened these soldiers was that after those bullets were fired, the enemy had already disappeared. Then, a black figure as fast as lightning ravaged the whole place. Almost in an instant, the soldiers present flew away upside down. Every soldier died in mid-air. Either their necks collapsed or their chests were sunken. When the operator in the control room saw this scene, his eyes nearly popped out. Everyone was stunned. However, when he noticed William Stryker rushing towards the 7th area, he woke up from the shock and wanted to report the situation through the communicator. However, over there, Stryker brought a black-haired Asian woman and several soldiers. "We have arrived at the 6th area." He happened to bump into Bai Xiao who was rushing over after killing someone. Click. As soon as the two sides met, several soldiers immediately raised their guns and pointed them at Bai Xiao. The black-haired Asian woman beside her stretched out her hands, and her long metal claws exuded a cold breath. Stryker saw Bai Xiao in front of him, wearing a black windbreaker, a black shirt, a round hat, and black gloves on his hands, looking like a British gentleman. What surprised him even more was Bai Xiao's young face. "Who are you?" Stryker didn't ask where his soldiers were and why he didn't stop Bai Xiao's nonsense. He knew very well that since the other party was able to come from the 7th area to the 6th area, it was obvious that during this period, his soldiers had either subdued, or killed them all. There can be no other result. "Why do you know my base?" Stryker stared at the boy, trying to capture the information he wanted from his eyes and expression. To his dismay, all he saw was disgust and murderous intent. He was very confused. He didn't remember that he had provoked such a person. Could it be that he was a friend of an Asian mutant who had been captured by him? Relatives? Bai Xiao didn't have any intention of talking nonsense when he saw him move. The figure suddenly blurred for a moment, and in a blink of an eye, Bai Xiao had already crossed a distance of more than 20 meters and stood in front of Striker. The Asian black-haired woman reacted the fastest, shouted angrily, and used long, sharp hands. The spike aimed at Bai Xiao's head and stabbed it. As a result, in everyone's eyes, Bai Xiao didn't even move. The woman's chest seemed to have been hit hard. After a muffled sound, the woman flew away and slammed into the wall about 10 meters behind her. The wall was dented, dense cracks spread, and the woman was embedded in it in a strange posture. At this time, several soldiers also reacted, and quickly turned their guns to point at Bai Xiao and pulled the trigger. However, the end result was exactly the same as the previous woman, except this time Bai Xiao moved, but it was too fast, so fast that it made people feel it's so incredible that I can't even capture the figure. The figures blurred for a moment and then solidified, but the soldiers were already dead. With a few muffled sounds, they collapsed limply on the ground. This sudden horrific scene made Striker's pupils dilate, and he couldn't help sweating on his forehead. He stiffly turned his head and glanced at the dead soldier lying on the ground, and then at the wall embedded in the wall not far away. Asian woman twitching and struggling. Finally, he took a deep breath and looked at Bai Xiao. No matter what you want, as long as you let me go, I can give you money, power, women. Then I hope you can pay a price that satisfies me. After Bai Xiao said this, he gave Striker a gentle push and asked him to lead him to the monitoring control room. Striker didn't dare to resist, so he had no choice but to lead the way, but his brain was spinning crazily. He was thinking, what was the purpose of this obviously Asian kid breaking into the base? Save people? Or murder? Judging from the ability shown by the other party, Striker is 80% sure that only a mutant can do this, and it is a very high-level mutant. Ability in physical speed? The other party said that he hoped to pay a price that satisfied him, and it was these words that kept Striker from feeling completely desperate. Otherwise, in desperation, he will definitely give an order to activate the self-destruct system. Bai Xiao definitely knew Striker's character, that's why he said those words. After the other party took him to the monitoring control room, there was a huge special metal iron door in front of him. There was no password, and there was no order from William Striker. Will not open. Open the door. Striker noticed Bai Xiao's eyes signaling him, hesitated for a moment, and then pointed at the camera in the corner in front and spoke. At this time, the metal door was opened. Chapter 29. 2 metal doors were opened, and Xiao walked in with Striker. Looking at the operator who stood up with a look of horror on his face, he pushed him away, stepped forward and started typing on the keyboard. At this time, the computer knowledge I learned before appeared at this moment. He immediately brought up the interface of the mental device, and when Striker behind him saw this scene, his pupils suddenly shrank, and fear immediately emerged in his heart. He immediately guessed what the Asian boy was going to do. So he suddenly turned around and pulled out the pistol from the operator's belt beside him, pointing it at Bai Xiao. But by the time he did it last night, it was over. Bai Xiao turned off the function of the mind-shielding device. Without the mind-shielding device, his psychic power spread instantly and controlled Striker and the operator. Striker held up the gun. Although his mind was still there, his body was no longer under control. The response is pretty quick. Bai Xiao then turned to Striker, who was looking at him with a cold smile, glanced at the operator next to him, and sent a psychic bomb over. The opponent was instantly brain-dead and collapsed on the ground. Striker raised his pistol and heard the movement beside him, feeling increasingly desperate. Let me see what you, a pervert, have done all these years. Bai Xiao invaded Striker's brain unscrupulously and looked through his memories. Although it was said to be a viewing, in fact, this huge memory only lasted a moment in the outside world. Things. When Striker's memory was read, the inhumane and bloody scenes kept appearing, which also made Bai Xiao's inner murderous intention continue to accumulate. You are really a complete trash. In your eyes, those mutants are just a bunch of beasts. What did you do with your life, Striker? They are just beasts. They should not be in this world. They are a group of freaks. They hinder social order. They should all die. The same goes for you, you monster. Striker knew that he could not survive. All my hopes have vanished. He no longer concealed his ugly face of disgust and hatred for Mutant. He kept swearing and cursing in his mouth, and his eyes were full of madness. Compared to those people I killed before, you are the real villain, Striker. Death is a mercy to you. I will not let you die. I will let you become a walking zombie. I will let you in endless in pain and torture. I watched myself become a lunatic, wandering on the streets, and being bullied until I died. Even if you fall into hell, I will remember you, I will find you, and then let you continue to enjoy endless years of pain and torture in hell. After Bai Xiao said something coldly, the majestic spiritual power was released instantly. At this moment, Striker's eyes lost their luster and became dull. Bai Xiao used his huge spiritual power to weave an illusory and real world for Striker. He weaved a fantasy hell. The most vicious punishments in the world will appear in this hell, and Striker will go through it day after day. Year after year in this hell, I enjoy the most unbearable pain in the world. He will also become one of those mutants who have experienced bloody and cruel human experiments, playing that role over and over again, and watching his former subordinates dissect and vivisect his own body over and over again. In order to prevent him from brain death, he even set up a special program. When he is about to brain die, Bai Xiao's psychic power will be injected into Striker to revive his weak mind. In order for someone to notice Striker's condition and use other psychic masters to liberate Striker, he specially deployed 3 psychic defense lines around the illusory world, and also set up traps, psychic bombs, and psychic storms. Once someone tried to rescue him, that person would be killed. 2 shots will not kill you, but you will be disabled. Well, actually he was the preparation for the 2 spiritual masters on Earth. Don't blame him for being cruel if he wants to save the person he wants to torture. After doing all this, Bai Xiao also felt that his spiritual power was a bit weak. After all, he was weaving an illusory world, creating spiritual defenses, and setting traps. The workload was indeed huge. But Bai Xiao felt very satisfied. People can't, at least don't be as cruel as someone like Striker. If and when he appears in front of him, he will reward the other person with a set of torture packages in the illusory hell world. Bai Xiao, who was satisfied with what happened last night, didn't care about the dull-eyed Striker. This guy's mind was imprisoned, and he was like a walking zombie, but his survival instinct was still there, and he knew how to look for food, drink water, etc. He couldn't even dig through the trash can. Okay, I won't die anyway. In addition, Bai Xiao thought about it and injected a magic seed into this guy's heart. As long as his brain is not separated from his body and his body is not crushed, when his body is damaged to the limit, this magic seed will automatically release energy to heal. So considerate, so considerate. Bai Xiao was moved by his behavior. Bai Xiao, who was moved by himself, went to the place where Mutant was imprisoned. The original guards here were automatically transferred because of his invasion, and then participated in the siege of him, which naturally ended in total destruction. The holding cell is deep inside the base, with Lake Alkali at the other end of the thick wall behind it. As you can imagine, the conditions underground are dark and closed. Even a normal person who is imprisoned here will turn into a madman. The passage made of metal mesh bridges has prison cells on both sides, where mutants are imprisoned, some big and some small, including whites, Asians, blacks and other ethnic groups. They really treat everyone equally. No matter which race they are, as long as they are mutants, Striker will catch them. Seeing Bai Xiao appear, the group of mutants silently grasped the railing of the iron door and squinted at him. Seeing that Bai Xiao was dressed completely differently from everyone else in the base, and thinking of the crazy sirens and gunshots before, the eyes of these mutants shone with a light of hope. But no one dared to speak out of numbness and fear. Chapter 30. Bai Xiao walked forward slowly and came to the center of the metal mesh bridge. He glanced at each one by one twice. Facing the pairs of eyes with hope and prayer, although he had seen this scene from Striker's memory a long time ago, he still felt in his heart. Still somewhat touched. This kind of touch is called kindness. There will always be goodness in people's hearts, but there are definitely some who are not human. Some of the pale and thin bodies had lost their eyes, some had lost their arms, and some had lost their legs. Some have no noses or ears. It can only be worse, not the worst. Bai Xiao sighed silently. He stretched out his hand and saw a golden energy light group blooming on his palm. The energy light group flowed like water, squirming and emitting golden beams as dense as needles, file size, and hit accurately. Chains on the iron gate of the fence. This startled all the imprisoned mutants, but then their faces were full of excitement. They definitely had no idea what was going on except for the mutant who lost his eye. They were excited because they mistakenly thought that the handsome big brother in front of them, the big boy, was also a mutant and came to save them. Everyone had a feeling of identification. After being tortured, the only people they could trust were fellow mutants. What's more, Bai Xiao is handsome and sunny, especially the black windbreaker and round hat. He is as elegant as a noble prince, and he does not look like a bad guy. These mutants also know how to help each other, and help those who have lost their eyes or legs in a healthy way. The mutants came out and gathered around Bai Xiao, their eyes full of gratitude. I thought I needed someone to do something for me, so I could pay a little bit up front. So, can anyone help? Looking at the group of small and large mutants around him, Bai Xiao said. I'd do anything for you, sir. Immediately, a blonde white girl who had lost her arm spoke excitedly. The rest of the people immediately started shouting not to be outdone. I would like that too. I'm strong and I can help you move your stuff, sir. I'll set fire to it. I can squirt. The chirping sound made the originally quiet confinement room noisy. Bai Xiao smiled, stretched out his hand and pressed down, and the noise stopped abruptly. Okay, then you all come to help. I believe that if you pay for anything, you will be rewarded. So in order for you to help me better, I will give you some reward first. Then start with the youngest. Bai Xiao looked at the most miserable mutant, a little girl who looked about 4 or 5 years old, with slightly darker skin. But she is also the most pitiful. There is only one ear on her whole little head. Her mouth has been cut off, leaving only a row of small teeth. She looks hideous and ugly. She also has only one hand and one foot left. She needs to be cared for. Help! Seeing Bai Xiao looking over, an older child with a little girl beside him pulled her up to Bai Xiao. Under everyone's gaze, Bai Xiao stretched out his hand and put it on the little girl's head. The little girl's body trembled instinctively in fear, but then she felt a warmth coming from her little head. And among the excited and adoring eyes of others, they saw Bai Xiao's hand pressing against the little girl's head, glowing with a golden light. As warm as the sun. The others seemed to have guessed something, their expressions became more and more excited and expectant, and what happened next was just as they expected. Bai Xiao's golden magic blooms and covers the little girl's body, stimulating cell regeneration, and the golden magic is not rough. On the contrary, it warms and nourishes cell activity, and will not cause the original cells to quickly deplete due to the stimulation of cell regeneration in a short period of time. Reduced lifespan. As a result, the little girl's missing facial features, flesh and blood tissue on her hands and feet, visible to the naked eye, slowly sprouted, squirmed, and grew. Originally, this process would cause itchiness, and pain would be caused by the new growth of flesh breaking through the original dead flesh, but he also used his spiritual power to comfort the little girl, so the little girl didn't show any pain at all. After a while, the little girl's missing parts returned to their original appearance. The skin is definitely still dark. It is due to genes, and Bai Xiao cannot bring about whitening effect. Her hands and feet were intact, and her lost eyeballs had grown back. The little girl saw the light again and saw the tall, handsome and sunny big brother in front of her. The little girl raised her little head in a daze, looking at Bai Xiao who had brought her a new life, and couldn't help but fill her big eyes with tears. He looks aggrieved and a little dazed, which is really cute. The little girl didn't cry, but was a little at a loss. She timidly whispered, "Sir, can you squat down?" Bai Xiao raised his eyebrows and knelt down under the little girl's expectant gaze. The little girl stepped forward, stretched out her little hands and hugged Bai Xiao's neck. She buried her little head on her shoulders and finally kissed Bai Xiao's face gently. "Thank you, sir, Lina will always remember you and will pray for you every day." Bai Xiao touched the little girl's head and whispered in her ear, "I will wait for your prayers every day, Lina." He let go of Lina, then stood up and looked at the others, and gradually began to repair the missing mutants. The process is not difficult, and the speed gradually increases as the number of times increases. This process makes Bai Xiao more and more skilled in the use of magic power, which is equivalent to finding a bunch of test subjects for himself. After treating the last mutant child, he once again received a group of admiring eyes. It is estimated that if he really opens his mouth, at least these mutants will follow him wholeheartedly. But Bai Xiao has no such idea at all, mainly because he doesn't have the time to take care of children at the moment. Since he paid the remuneration, he also asked these mutants to help go to the adamantium test area, where Wolverine Logan and the Asian woman were injected. Coincidentally, when he arrived at this place, the black-haired Asian woman was also waiting for him. I remember you were called Death Girl. Bai Xiao looked at the other woman, who was as cold as a robot, and the majestic spiritual power suddenly hit her. Chapter 31. What a disorganized memory. Bai Xiao did not read the dead woman's memory. The main reason was that the memory was too confusing. It was obviously due to brainwashing that the memory was broken into fragments, disrupted, and squeezed. After brainwashing, the new memories suppressed those messy memories. That's why this woman follows Striker's orders. He was not interested in this woman, and he was too lazy to spend time helping her sort out her memories. He rudely sealed her mind completely, and she immediately became a walking zombie like Striker. Go, help me move things, I paid you. Bai Xiao clapped his hands and pointed at the condensed adamantium in the large pool in front. Adamantium is indeed an excellent metal on Earth, but the only inventory is here. After Striker injected adamantium into Logan and Death Girl, there was no suitable use for it. It's okay to use its characteristics to create cold weapons, but not many people can use it. After all, the only ones who can farm adamantium katana are Deadpool's cheap-talking ones. Others have no use at all. To make a firearm or something like that, it would be a waste to use adamantium, so Striker used it to make some bullets and gave them to Wolverine Logan. It's not as good as adamantium, which was artificially synthesized, so its positioning seems awkward, causing Striker to leave it in the cold. This lab is also waiting for new people to see if it can create a new Wolverine or Death Girl. If you keep waiting, you will wait for the arrival of the new owner. Under the command of Bai Xiao, this group of mutants were obedient and lifted a large piece of adamantium with all their strength. The little carrots were just pretending, but there was a little fat guy among them who seemed to be a powerful mutant. He was very strong and weighed several tons. Adamantium can be lifted. Bai Xiao did not help, but just led the way and placed adamantium on a transport truck in the base. He had already opened the flood channel when it was in the monitoring and control room. Bai Xiao remembered that Striker had a son who had not been brought to the base yet. He knew the location but was too lazy to look for it. He asked Mutant to get into the back compartment of the truck, and also brought some food, water, and quilts. Surprisingly, the woman named Death Woman, although her mind was closed by him, seemed to follow her instinctively. Bai Xiao didn't stop him. He drove the group of mutants all the way to his Ford SUV, and asked one of the mutants who could drive to drive the car and follow the transport truck to find a small uninhabited house nearby. Let Mutant put the food and quilts into the small house. Then he said to the group of mutants, it won't be long before someone will take you away, where you can survive. After saying that, he ignored the reluctant looks of the mutants, moved the adamantium into the Ford SUV, and chose to leave. His kindness only goes so far. I drove to Alberta City and found a small internet cafe. I easily found the information about Xavier Youth Mutant School using a computer search, and found the contact number and email address above. Through the email address, send a message to the other party and then leave. As for adamantium, he sent it to New York through a shipping company. He must have found an intermediary who had disguised the shipment, otherwise it would be considered a strategic material and might be seized. Although the price spent was high and it would soon wipe out his few assets, Bai Xiao didn't care. After all, he already knew the other person's private property from Striker's memory. There is a lot of money in his personal account, more than 10 million US dollars. This old guy also made a lot of money in the military by reimbursing military supplies, otherwise it would not be possible to build a dam base privately. Maintaining operation, maintenance, and daily expenses all year round can cost a lot of money. The money is definitely cheaper than Bai Xiao. The more than 10 million US dollars can be transferred through the account password, and the operation is not complicated. In addition, Bai Xiao wants to learn magic more and more, but there is no storage space. It is troublesome to do many things without storage space. The trip to Canada was perfect. Bai Xiao was in a good mood. He got the money, Striker got the punishment he deserved, and saved people, which made him feel spiritually satisfied. What a win! After that, Bai Xiao was not in a hurry to return to New York. Instead, he wandered around Alberta, where he transferred Striker's money to his own account. This kind of thing cannot withstand investigation, but when Striker's madness is discovered, it is unclear whether the military will investigate a madman. Even if it is investigated, who knows how long it will take. By then, all the money would have been spent by him, and even if he was found out, he wouldn't care. Now his strength is such that he doesn't need to keep a low profile. On the contrary, it was his email that attracted the attention of Xavier Youth Mutant School. In the corridor inside the school, Jean hurried to the principal's office and found Principal Charles. It was still daytime, the weather was clear and the sun was shining brightly. It shone through the window behind the professor, making the office look warm and welcoming. At the moment Charles was sitting in a wheelchair with a group of students in class, but when he noticed Jean coming to the office, Charles said gently to the students, "That's it for today's class, I hope you can gain something today. Get out of class is over. Goodbye, Professor." The students said politely, and then greeted Jean again, and Jean responded gently. After the students left, she walked up to Charles. "Professor, someone delivered an email to our mailbox a few minutes ago. The content is that there is a group of rescued mutants 3 kilometers southwest of Lake Alkali in Alberta, Canada. They are still in danger." The professor's eyes flashed, and then he said, "Let's go, I need to determine their location." When Jean heard what the professor said, she immediately pushed the professor to the most secret place in the school, which was a secret place where the brainwave amplifier built with Magneto's help was placed. Here, the professor can strengthen his spiritual power through a brainwave amplifier and perceive the hearts of all people around the world. Chapter 32. After walking through a suspended passage, Jean pushed the professor to the instrument on the middle platform. The professor picked up the metal helmet and put it on his head, and turned on the instrument. The majestic spiritual power suddenly spread. The area near Alkali Lake in Alberta, Canada, was also accurately found. After accurately locating the group of mutants mentioned in the email, he saw this group of nervous mutants staying in a small, uninhabited house. Everyone was clinging to each other, including children of several years old. But what made Charles relieved was that these children seemed to have no injuries and no blows. He spoke suddenly. "Kids, I'm Charles and I'm here to help you." His voice spread across vast distances through spiritual power and entered the brains of all the mutants in the house in Lake Alkali, Canada. The originally quiet group of mutants were startled when they heard the sound. Everyone looked around blankly, as if trying to find the source of the sound. Finally, an older white young man tried to speak. "Hello, Mr. Charles, are you talking to us?" "Yes, kid." "Thank you, Mr. Charles, are you here to help us?" "Yes, I am also a mutant. I opened a mutant school. There are many mutants like you living here. I would like to invite you to join the school. You don't need to hide here. It will be safe here. What you said is the same as what the gentleman said. I think we are willing to join, but what do you want us to do?" Charles's eyes flashed, and then he said, "Wait, I will let my students set off to pick you up now. You just need to wait, I will continue to pay attention to you, I believe it will not take a few hours to arrive." "Where is your school?" "New York. It seems very far." "Don't worry, kid, we have a plane." "Thank you, sir, we'll be here for you." After the psychic call ended, Charles turned his wheelchair and looked at Jean. "Something bad happened to those children. I think you should all set out to pick them up. In addition, there is a base belonging to Stryker there. Go and take a look there." "Case? Professor, you mean?" "Yes, a person we are familiar with broke into Stryker's base. His base is hidden in the Alkali Lake Dam and built a mind-shielding device. We ignored it." The professor sighed. They had also tried to find Stryker before, because of past experiences, including Logan's experience. He knew that Stryker was hunting down mutants and conducting human experiments, but the other party had been hiding, so that Stryker and his base were never found. Now it seemed that he was saved by the boy he once thought might be extremely dangerous. The professor was curious about how the boy determined the location of the Stryker base, but now was obviously not the time to think about that. The main purpose now was to bring those children who had suffered pain back to school. Jean nodded and turned to leave. She was going to gather the other X-Men members. Looking at Jean's leaving figure, the professor still maintained that gentle expression, not knowing what he was thinking. "After the first meeting, did you add spiritual direction to yourself?" He is really a cautious and rational person, but he still lacks a sense of security. In fact, what he didn't tell Jean was that under the amplification of the psychic amplifier, when searching for Alberta, he had already perceived the existence of Xiao, but he did not contact her rashly. First, the other party had a deep prejudice against him. And the second is that he senses that there are many layers of thick defense lines on the other side's spiritual level. He couldn't make contact with the other party even if he wanted to. Unless Bai Xiao took the initiative to open his mind, he could communicate. Otherwise, he would have to forcefully invade, but that would undoubtedly put the two sides into complete opposition. This is not the result Charles wants to see. But at least, judging from this incident, Charles believed that the boy was not bad, at least he could distinguish between good and evil. Maybe, he could try to build a friendship with the other person. However, this seems somewhat difficult. Charles couldn't help but get a headache when he thought about the cold and disgusted look in the other person's eyes when they first met in Chinatown. Bai Xiao didn't know the strange thoughts of the bald old man. He returned to New York. After he came back, adamantium had been taken over by him. It was really his conscience, and it was definitely important that he set up some spiritual hints for the other party. Bai Xiao stood in his room, looked at the large piece of adamantium in front of him, and started thinking. He had tested it when he was in Alberta. This metal could withstand part of his compressed magic energy. Although it was a whole piece, it should be able to barely meet his usage requirements when made into a weapon. And after a little estimation, he had used it several times. It has to be scrapped. Is it possible to make several of them? What's more, as the strength increases, this weapon will probably be eliminated soon. It's the type of food that is tasteless and is a pity to throw away. It seems that the only one that can meet his requirements is vibranium. Then he still has to go to Wakanda? Forget it, let's get it right in the next step. After thinking about it for a while, Bai Xiao gave up the idea of going to Wakanda to get vibranium, mainly because he is getting stronger and stronger now, and he can't beat the stronger ones even with weapons. He is weak and can kill without weapons. So far, Magneto is a bit difficult to get at best. Let's cosplay Kizura for a while. Later, I will run to Asgard through Thor to see if I can collect some URU metal to build weapons. Now the main mission still has to kill all the vampires in New York, but what makes Bai Xiao a little strange is that there is no trace of werewolves in New York. Could it be that they are all hiding in the sewers and lingering? Being oppressed by the vampire clan until their numbers are running low? Then wouldn't his experience be greatly reduced? Bai Xiao thinks it is necessary to investigate. Chapter 33. The heavy rain kept beating against the windows outside the house. At night, the rooms in the house bloom with a faint yellow light. The old furnishings and furniture in the room are enough to prove that the owner of this house is not very rich. Through the glass window, you can vaguely see that the roadside in the distance is not high-rise buildings, but rows of trees growing irregularly. Obviously, this is not within the city, but outside the city. And inside the house, a vague groan was coming. In the living room, a tall figure wearing a black coat stretched out his hand, pinched the neck of another figure like an iron pliers, slammed him against the wall, and lifted him up from the ground against the wall. Please, please, don't do this. The man whose throat was choked was frightened and begged for mercy. His body was very majestic and tall. He had obviously been exercising all year round or doing manual labor. He had slightly curly blonde hair, white skin, and his slightly light blue pupils were full of tears. Fear. He simply couldn't believe what had happened before. In front of the man in front of him, his strength was as small as that of a child, without even the slightest ability to resist. He recognized the person in front of him, a person who looked like Death God. Under the yellowish light, his side face was illuminated, with dark skin, black leather coat, and a long sword on his back. Why? The man's deep voice came, making the fearful strong man full of doubts. What? I can't find you bastards recently. You used to be like rats full of stench, spreading in the city, but you haven't been active recently. What are you hiding? What makes you do this? I to know why. The strong man smiled sadly, and a few sharp teeth could be vaguely seen in his mouth, which were enough to prove his identity as a vampire. A man just like you, Daywalker. During the time you disappeared, another terrible person was massacring us. He had the same sense of smell as a hunting dog. He could find all of us and massacre us. 3 factions of families were massacred by him without any resistance. So you are afraid and are willing to leave the city for this? The man named Daywalker interrupted. Yes, he is a butcher, and his methods are more ruthless and terrifying than yours. None of the Blood Clan targeted by him can escape. Blood Clan like us, who have no family support, can only escape from the city and rely on the blood of those animals. On one's last legs. The strong man said tremblingly. When he talked about the butcher, the fear on his face was undisguised. This was a deeper fear than the Daywalker in front of him. Even just a name can make him lose courage. Interesting man, another vampire hunter. An ugly smile appeared on Daywalker's cold face. Interesting? He is an executioner, Daywalker. No one in the Blood clan can escape his gaze. No matter men, women, old or young, they will die in his hands. Don't forget, you are also a vampire. The strong man said with a sad smile. After hearing this, Daywalker showed no fear or fear. He just stared at the vampire in front of him and said softly, "Goodbye." After the words fell, the other hand held a short sword coated with silver powder and pierced the strong man's heart. The next moment, with a scream, the strong vampire man was covered in sparks and black smoke and burned automatically until he turned into ashes. After killing the vampire, Daywalker turned coldly towards the door and left the house. A black Ford modified muscle car was heard outside the door. He opened the door and got in, put on his sunglasses, started the sports car and left. No one but him knew that in this remote place, a vampire died quietly. Driving all the way, the sports car arrived at a modified car park on the west coast of New York. On a rainy night, he opened the car door and didn't care at all about the rain hitting him. He entered the parking lot, where there were various modified motorcycles and sports cars, as well as hanging chains and equipment for forging weapons. "You seem to be in a good mood, Blade. Did you find the answer you were looking for?" In the center of the parking lot, a white-haired old man was holding a modified short-barreled shotgun. The vigilant look on his face dissipated. Blade took off his black leather coat, revealing the tight lining and strong muscles underneath. He took off the sword on his back and hung it on the clothes rack and weapon rack beside him. "Someone like me appeared and slaughtered those bastards during this period, causing them to flee the city out of fear." Blade casually picked up the new weapon forged on the metal table nearby and said while looking at it. The old man was very surprised. "Although I noticed that someone has been very active recently, I didn't expect it to be like this, a new vampire hunter? I have never heard of such a top hunter coming to New York. And it seems his sense of smell is sharper than yours, Blade. I don't know his identity, but he is not from the hunter's circle. Why are you so sure? No hunter in the hunter's circle has the ability to fight alone. The vampires in the city of New York have fled because of the massacre. This has never happened," Blade said with a frown. "Vampires are a race with very strong vitality and reproductive ability. They are good at hiding in the darkness and have an extremely long history. They have suffered lessons in countless wars. Human weapons are becoming more and more powerful. Those vampires know that ruling the world through viral spread is simply not feasible, so they learn to hide in the crowd. Middle. When there are vampires, hunters will naturally be born, but hunters are never the dominant ones. In a city, because of the existence of a hunter, all the vampires will run away collectively out of fear. Blade himself cannot do this. If there really was such a hunter, there would be no news in the circle. So this person has another identity." Chapter 34. "Okay, because of him, I'm unemployed now." The old man spread his hands, looking helpless. But there was joy in his voice. As an old vampire hunter, he cannot resist the erosion of time, but his lifelong dream is to completely eliminate the vampire race from the human world. This is the meaning of his existence. For this reason, he did not hesitate to die on the road of hunting vampires. He never regretted it. But then the old man looked at Blade with some worry, that man can kill so many vampires in New York and escape, and he is not a member of the circle. Will he find you? Blade was born accidentally, a human-vampire hybrid. Judging from the name of Daywalker, he is different from other vampires. He is not afraid of the sun. He is still a vampire in essence. He has strength and speed that are comparable to or even surpass those of vampires. Everyone in the hunting circle knows that Blade is an alien existence. Although most of them might be on guard against Blade, at least both sides are on the same page and won't start a fight when they meet. But that person may not know this, if he and Blade meet one day. Thinking of that possibility, the old man couldn't help but frown. Blade didn't take it seriously. "Don't worry, Whistler, I'm a hunter, not a prey." He was a proud man and he always believed in himself. Even though that person's recent achievements surprised him, he still believed in himself. Such misunderstandings can be avoided, so there is no need to let accidents happen. The old man still insisted, "It seems that I need to meet my old friends, or get some news from them." "Whatever you want." Blade did not stop what the old man had done for himself. The relationship between them never requires hypocrisy and shirk. Blade is more curious about that person, and maybe from that person, maybe all the information he wants. He couldn't help but think of the vampire writings on the ancient parchments he had seen before. The contents described in those writings shocked him, so he left New York during this period to pursue clues. Now, the situation is in chaos, and the clues he wants to find may fall into the hands of that person. What do those things mean? It describes a ritual, the blood god comes, and I tell you everything. Atop a high-rise building in New York, there is a swimming pool, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a bar. The ashes on the ground are enough to prove why the place is empty. Xiao, who was wearing a black windbreaker, black lining, and a round hat like an elegant gentleman, looked at the vampire elder who was lying on the ground with his legs cut off, and said politely, "Although it's not necessary, I still thank you very much. Goodbye for your answer." After he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand, and a tiny laser beam hit the forehead of the desperate vampire elder. As if being irradiated by the energy of the sun, the elder could not even scream and began to spontaneously combust, completely disappearing into ashes. Summon blood god? A boss has appeared. Bai Xiao's eyes are full of smiles. Since returning to New York, for a month, he has not been thinking about going to Wakanda. He has attacked with high intensity and almost torn through the entire New York. With the blessing of psychic power, he should not go too far with these vampires. Easy. So much so that the 3 vampire families that were hiding deep in New York were all wiped out. He has experienced several waves of strengthening this month. He probably killed over 3,000 vampires, not counting those lowly vampire servants. Compared to a month ago, he felt that his strength should be more than 3 times greater. You must know that a month ago, his originally level was already very high. He was basically one of the ceilings except for people like Ancient One. Now his strength has improved again. 3 times. Now he can confidently say that, except for the Ancient One, there is basically no one on Earth who is his opponent. The active vitality, the growth of magic power in the cells, and this growth rate, he felt that it was about to overflow. This was definitely an illusion. The number of cells increased as his strength increased, and there was no upper limit at all. Wanting to overflow simply doesn't exist. However, although the harvest was satisfactory, it was not enough. At least in his own perception, he was far from the level of Heavenly Father, and there was a considerable distance between him and Kia Heavenly Father. But it should be easy to defeat Thor at this stage, but Thor has a very good foundation, and he will be a cheater when he grows up. So Bai Xiao is not satisfied yet. He could also feel that the experience of vampires began to decrease as he grew up. Only vampires with a large base and pure bloodline could bring objective life essence. What a coincidence, the so-called boss that is about to appear is another quite objective experience income. For this reason, he quietly let the remaining vampires escape from the city, just waiting for the boss to come one day. Bai Xiao quietly found 2 vampire elders, modified and controlled each other's thinking. As long as a vampire built a summoning altar, he would be notified and go to harvest. As for whether he could beat the boss, he didn't think about it. The harvest from this month of massacre is not only the objective essence of life, but also magic power. Bai Xiao has not yet studied the nature and composition of his magic power, but what he does know is that this magic power is snake oil. In addition to healing, it also has very powerful destructive properties. When injected into a vampire's body, it can produce the same fatal effects as the sun, even more brutally. If a tiny bit is injected into a vampire's body, the purer the bloodline, the faster and more miserably the vampire will die, just like a flame igniting a barrel of kerosene. When he was hunting vampires, he had not yet developed the use of magic power, so he missed this point. As a result, those silver weapons were still gathering dust at home. All I can say is that he has a completely restrained relationship with the so-called blood god, and I have the advantage. Even if we can't beat him, isn't there Ancient One who can take care of it? If this blood god is really something extraordinary, the Ancient One must step in to stop it. There is no movement now, and it is basically a state of acquiescence. Bai Xiao is used to jumping horizontally anyway, so this time is not lacking. He was still muttering secretly in his heart, he was determined to eat this old woman, even Jesus couldn't stop her. Chapter 35. As a result of Bai Xiao's killing spree, many large-scale population disappearances occurred in New York. But the NYPD received no news at all. Even Bai Xiao's other vest, Rainy Night Butcher, has been lost. There has been no case of large-scale gang massacres in Queens, nor in other areas of New York. The main reason is that Bai Xiao's first hunting target has shifted from the gangsters to the vampires. After all, if you gain experience, you must gain experience for monsters with more experience. The little bit of life essence brought by killing ordinary people is no longer in his eyes. So without his intervention as the rainy night butcher, wouldn't there be fewer cases of massacre? In addition, although he killed a lot of vampires this month, the vampires he found did not even have the ability to resist. This requires the use of psychic power. Bai Xiao's process is very simple. Find the vampire gathering place, and then use psychic power to directly control the field. There are innocent people who use their inner hints to directly let them leave, manipulating those vampires to wait for death where they are. When the ordinary people left, he used a few waves of magic power to turn the vampires into ashes and took away the video cassettes according to the old rules. There were no witnesses, and there were no gunshots. The monster killing efficiency was surprisingly high, and there was not much noise. So it didn't make any waves. It can only be said that psychic power is very useful. Whether it is an ordinary person or a vampire with a slightly stronger willpower and mental strength, it is a great weapon for controlling the field. He is safe, but the NYPD is in trouble. Because as early as 2 months ago, the murderer was not committing the crime. After a large-scale investigation, they found that they did not find any clues at all. They found a few suspicious targets and several soldiers who had retired from the special forces, but they always found something different. Outside of physical presence, the body is basically defective. A person like this did not have the conditions to massacre more than 200 gunmen. In addition, Queen's Police Chief Simon is more troubled by the fact that the FBI group of joint investigators also evacuated, 2 left and 2 remained. Although they are working hard to investigate together, he always feels that this investigation has been abandoned. Simon already felt that his career as director was over. No matter that the butcher has become very popular in the United States and has many fans, it has nothing to do with him. At least Simon did not give a sufficiently satisfactory ability in this super serial massacre. He stepped down because of the involvement of the FBI. Not really, but the stigma of being criticized for ability is still there. This was much better than stepping down. Even so, Simon was still a little angry, so he went to the Joint Investigation Team's conference room more frequently. However, although the members of the Joint Investigation Team were under a lot of pressure, it was nothing compared to Simon. They have gathered the entire New York State's elite detectives here, and no one can find it. Even if they are responsible, it won't be a big deal. As long as the butcher is not committing the crime, the file will be sealed as an unsolved case. After all these years in New York, there are still few files on unsolved cases sealed. The police officers who initially handled the case were still not responsible. Get off work when it's time to get off work. Just among the members of the investigation team, some people noticed that Chief George seemed to be busy doing something alone recently. When he went to work every day, he could always be seen in a trance and distracted. Colleagues also asked about it, but Chief George gave it a perfunctory response, saying that there were family matters. The colleagues suddenly understood and comforted her without saying anything else. After all, it was not easy to ask about private matters. It was time for George to get off work that day. In the evening, just as George was about to get in the car with a firm look in his eyes, he happened to meet FBI agent Phil Coulson, whom he had not seen for a long time. He was talking to 2 other FBI agents. For Phil Coulson, a man with a gentle personality, George the First have a good impression of them. They have strong professional abilities, and they don't interfere randomly when getting along with them. But then he thought of something else, and his eyes flickered. He didn't rush to get in the car. After Phil Coulson explained something to the 2 agents, he stepped forward and said hello. "Hey, Phil Coulson." "Hey George, long time no see." Phil Coulson saw George looking a little haggard, so he asked, "George, you look much haggard than before. You may need to pay attention." "Yeah, I might be a little angry lately." George did not explain much, but looked at Phil Coulson and asked seemingly casually, "Did you and Agent Natasha Romanoff withdraw from the Joint Investigation Team during this time? We have other tasks, and with outstanding elites like you here, it's not a problem to be missing the 2 of us, but we have no choice in the boss's order, right?" Phil Coulson's expression still seems gentle, but his eyes are observing, looking at George in front of him. "Indeed, nice to see you Phil Coulson, see you next time." "Me too, bye George." Phil Coulson stood there, frowning slightly as he watched George turn around, get in the car, and drive away from the police station. Sure enough, he was noticed. How did he find out? After thinking about it, he turned around and drove away from the police station, driving all the way towards Changdao. It was a long distance and he drove for a long time before he arrived in front of a building in Changdao. After parking the car, he walked in. There were many people coming and going in front of the building, and there were also many colleagues who knew Phil Coulson. After nodding and saying hello to each other, there was not much communication. The overall look is very disciplined. Phil Coulson went through a series of swiping cards, verified them, and then went to the elevator. He rode the elevator all the way up, and finally reached the floor he wanted. The elevator door opened, and he walked along the clean, high-tech corridor to an office and knocked on it. A deep voice came from across the office. "Come in." Phil Coulson opened the door and saw his immediate boss, Director Nick Fury, sitting in an office chair in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows at the end of the spacious office. "Sir, someone from the NYPD discovered the target's identity." Chapter 36. Nick Fury is a bald black man who likes to wear a black leather coat and an eye patch on his left eye. He was immersed in processing documents when he heard Phil Coulson's words. He immediately raised his head in surprise and put down the work at hand. "Tell me about the situation. Our people discovered something unusual about Sergeant George of the Queen's Police Department a month ago. They inquired and learned that George had asked Simon about information about me and Natasha Romanoff. Subsequently, they followed up and discovered that George had been near the target's home for a period of time, and inquired about the target's information from its neighbors. He's also gathering that information. After they reported it to me, I went to the police station today and met George by chance. After a brief conversation, I confirmed that he was suspicious of me and Natasha Romanoff. How did he identify his target? It's unknown at the moment, but it's probably just an accident, and he's probably still in the suspicion stage." Phil Coulson answered. "If so, I think he should submit these clues to the joint investigation team and start a comprehensive investigation of the target, right?" Nick Fury crossed his hands and supported his chin, raising doubts. After Phil Coulson pondered for a moment, he replied, "Maybe I don't believe it. After all, we can't explore the target growth path now. If Natasha Romanoff hadn't personally observed it, I'm afraid we wouldn't believe it. Or maybe deep down he didn't want the boy to be arrested. Obviously, he subconsciously approved of the boy's behavior." Nick Fury gave a definite answer. Phil Coulson's eyes moved, and he remembered how he had gotten along with George, and he had some understanding of the other person's character. The other person was a person who loved his family, had always hated criminals, and was extremely loving and compassionate. This is an unquestionably good man. Only such a person would do these unreasonable behaviors, as the director said. But then he thought of his previous contact with George, and from the firm eyes of the other party, Phil Coulson understood clearly. He plans to go home and hand over the information he collected to the joint investigation team to formally launch an investigation into the target. George is a good man and a good policeman. He has the consciousness of being a policeman and believes that crimes should be punished by law. He will subconsciously agree with Bai Xiao's behavior and hesitation, but in the end the consciousness of the policeman makes him abandon this a hint of hesitation. Trust your own judgment, Phil Coulson, do your job, and Natasha Romanoff will work with you. We need the target to remain stable enough, continue to observe him, analyze the logic and thinking behind all his actions, and I want to get the most accurate character assessment of him." Fury answered without hesitation. "You want to recruit him?" Phil Coulson hesitated and said. Although this behavior was somewhat contrary to the agent's guidelines, he was still worried. Fury has always maintained trust in this old partner, although this trust is only compared to other agents. His character is to remain suspicious of everyone, and to keep the people around him and his subordinates. But he understands Phil Coulson's character and what Phil Coulson is worried about. Fury pondered for a moment, hummed on the desktop, and turned on the highest authority blocking function in the entire office. He said to Phil Coulson, "You and I have both experienced what happened in 1995, which made us know that the Earth is not alone. There are technologies, civilizations, and races in the universe that far exceed those of our time. It also means the crisis never leaves us, Phil Coulson. We need more support, we need a last line of defense that can deal with the crisis when it comes. That document you submitted to the Security Council?" Phil Coulson responded. 2 years after that incident broke out, Nick Fury submitted a document called the Avengers to the World Security Council, which detailed the situation of the Avengers and what was needed in the face of future huge crises or wars. Just strong enough to fight back. That is, the Avengers. But it was rejected. Nick Fury also submitted it many times, but it didn't get support at all, so the document was sealed and Phil Coulson forgot about it. Now director Nick Fury said these words to him. It's obviously preparing for the establishment of the Avengers. Its establishment requires the right person, but I have been looking for it for so many years, but I haven't found it. Nick Fury said something profound, and then stopped talking. But Phil Coulson obviously already knows what's coming next. The Rainy Night Butcher has been on the director's watch list from the beginning. If he was just considering whether he could be absorbed into the department at first, but after Natasha Romanoff's observation and contact, the director's mind has obviously changed. The power shown by the other party is no longer within the scope of ordinary people. People with such abilities have been quietly included in the director's candidate list of Avengers members. This is why the director chose to use resources and power to hide everything about the boy. That is to make preliminary preparations for continued observation and recruitment. In fact, many agents also follow this process. However, Phil Coulson never thought that the director would plan to restart the Avengers. Phil Coulson was even more confused that the director would say it to him. Without further explanation, Nick Fury shut down the device and let Phil Coulson go. Wait until Phil Coulson leaves. Nick Fury stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the night scene below, with a deep look in his one eye. He was able to say this to Phil Coulson because Phil Coulson would also be a part of his plan. It was definitely not about joining the Avengers, but he needed a bridge to communicate with the department. Fury is not sure whether the Avengers can be successfully established, but once established, he cannot allow the Avengers to accept government jurisdiction, but he cannot allow them to be free either. A close confidant is needed to participate in the establishment of the Avengers throughout the process and supervise and perform other duties on his behalf. John Shaw. Fury murmured, and after a while, there was a knock on the door. Chapter 37. As the door is opened, a woman wearing a Kevlar agent uniform walked in. She had burgundy hair, a good figure, and delicate and charming facial features. It was Natasha Romanoff. Sir. What's the catch? Fury turned around and looked at the top agent who had just joined the department not many years ago. His tone was as usual. Hawkeye's mission has been solved, and he is doing the finishing work over there. Natasha Romanoff stood as straight as a soldier, and her fierce temperament was clearly visible. Well done, Natasha Romanoff, you have 10 days off. Fury nodded with satisfaction. Although he was originally focused on killing this woman, when Hawkeye performed the mission, he discovered that this once notorious Russian spy had a somewhat tragic past and experience, and gave him a test mission, which he completed brilliantly. In the past few years, she has performed many difficult tasks many times with perfect perfection. As a result, he has become one of the top agents in the department. Fury is also very satisfied with his decision. Fury generously gave her 10 days of leave, but Natasha Romanoff was not so happy. Fury immediately saw what she was thinking. Natasha Romanoff. Sir, I have a question. About John Shaw. Fury looked at Natasha Romanoff quietly, who nodded. Also regarding vampires, after I left, I have been paying attention to his movements and recent events in New York. That strange death scene, which may have involved a creature I didn't believe existed. Vampire. Fury answered. Natasha Romanoff frowned. The director always knew. We have always had records of vampires, but for some reasons, these data files have been sealed and cannot be accessed with your permission. Fury did not deny it, but gave an affirmative answer. Blood Clan and Werewolves can even be traced back to the Middle Ages. Although these two races are deeply hidden, it does not mean that the capabilities of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency cannot detect them. It's just that it involves a series of transaction resource exchanges. He also received instructions from the former director to let the other party be free as long as the other party did not cross the line. He was reluctant and even did a lot of targeted research behind the scenes, but after all, he could no longer take action against him openly. In addition, the Blood Clan is relatively low-key and at least does not threaten public opinion and stability, so they can only ignore it. Only a few people knew about this top secret, and even less so when Natasha Romanoff had just joined. Phil Coulson reported that Xiao had made a weapon coated with silver powder. Fury knew that Xiao must have noticed the existence of vampires, but he still observed silently. In other words, This was also a test to test the opponent's ability and character. After the Stonewall Bar incident, Fury was officially confirmed to be included in the Avengers roster. Discovered and destroyed, Bai Xiao's abilities and personality perfectly fit Fury's philosophy. Fury has always believed that this world can only be dominated by humans, and he cannot promote human progress. He is not that capable, but human progress requires a period of stability and harmony. Any race that threatens to undermine this stability and peace is a potential threat. Fury is very satisfied with Bai Xiao's execution, especially after discovering the Blood Clan. He focused on it without even doing anything about fighting criminals. He really likes this kind of person. Isn't this an appropriate Avengers template? Otherwise Fury wouldn't have helped Bai Xiao take the initiative to cover up. With the initial investment, subsequent recruitment will go more smoothly. His idea is definitely wishful thinking, but Fury believes that this will only happen sooner or later. Natasha Romanoff didn't know what Fury was thinking. She just felt that her worldview had been refreshed once again. Mutants have appeared since World War II. Although there are many mutants with powerful abilities that exceed the specifications, at least in her understanding, they are still human beings. Most are genetic mutations. But creatures like vampires and werewolves should only exist in movies, TV series, and novels. Unexpectedly, the legend turned into reality, which had an impact on her. Natasha Romanoff was strong-willed and had made some guesses before she added it. After the slight shock, she calmed down immediately. She couldn't see clearly into the heart of her immediate boss, but she knew clearly that the other party knew that there was such a race, so he would definitely do it secretly. The preparations are done. I need you to keep it confidential, Natasha Romanoff, and know the agent rules. Understood, goodbye sir. Natasha Romanoff got the answer and turned around to leave. On the way out, Natasha Romanoff began to think about preparing some silver weapons for herself. If she ran into a vampire one day while performing a mission, it would be too dangerous to have no weapons to counterattack. She didn't want to die young or become a vampire. She has absolutely no interest in the handsome vampires in movies and TV shows. Natasha Romanoff would rather be a human. There are not many vampires in New York, so Bai Xiao has entered a vacation period. During his vacation, he used the money he got from Stryker to buy a few houses in several other areas. Definitely renting. In addition, I bought a single apartment in Queens for a total cost of only $1.5 million, including purchase tax, to temporarily improve the quality of life. As for the luxury house, it can only be said that there is not enough money. Living alone in a villa or manor is too luxurious, and there is no hostess, so he is even less interested. A single apartment is sufficient. The location is in Forest Hills on 75th Street in Queens, which is actually not far from his original apartment. There is a subway station within 10 minutes walk. He definitely doesn't need this thing. The main reason is that the apartment environment is very good. The apartment has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1 living room and 1 kitchen. Although it is not luxuriously decorated, it is clean and warm. Modern decoration, bright walls, furniture, and supporting facilities are all available. The spacious living room and sofa furniture also have a simple style. In addition, the surrounding environment is very good. Just like the literal meaning of Forest Hill, there are many vegetations, simple and wide driveways and paths, and trees are planted on both sides. Even the house is not surrounded by vegetation, giving it a natural feeling of living in a primeval forest. Because the people living around are basically the middle class and above, there are cleaning workers here every day to clean and trim the trees and vegetation. Chapter 38. It's a quiet place with a nice environment and few people. Even for an ordinary person in the United States, living here is considered to be above average, with a happy family. This house will accompany him for a long time. After returning the new house, Bai Xiao didn't plan to move the old house, so he just left it there. He didn't bother to sell it. After moving into his new home, Bai Xiao was in a relatively happy mood. There was a balcony on the second floor of the apartment. There were tables and chairs on the balcony. He was wearing a white sweater, sweatpants, and slippers. He squeezed himself a glass of orange juice and then sat on the chair. On the street, looking at the tall trees in front of me and the figures walking by on the street below, I felt happy. Noisy whistles are rarely heard here. Some only have the chirping of birds and other animals. Enjoying the tranquility of this moment, just like that, a week passed in a hurry. During this week, Bai Xiao did nothing but simply continued to accumulate the knowledge he should learn at home. He knew that the knowledge left behind by human civilization was never useless. The same is true for humans. In terms of knowledge accumulation, there is never too little. During this period, he did not buy ingredients in large quantities as before. Now his demand for food is not high. The initial need to consume a lot of crazy nutrients was because he was very lacking and needed to make up for it. In addition, the stronger the physical fitness, the higher the level of life. In terms of human structure, a large amount of food must be eaten to maintain the needs of the body and brain. Bai Xiao was like this from the beginning. Several rounds of comprehensive strengthening not only enhance physical fitness, but also develop brain thinking. The operation of brain thinking also requires a lot of nutrients to maintain. After the birth of magic, this magic with the properties of tiger balm can replace nutrients to maintain the energy needs of one's own movement and brain operation. The higher the level of life, the more so. For example, Odin, Ancient One, and other existences of level Godfather, the battles between the same levels do not span a few hours, but are measured in days or even months. If you don't eat or drink water for such a long time, won't you have to wait until the battle is over to starve to death? At that level, the stronger the life level, the less external nutritional needs are taken into the body. Even if you eat, it is just for the sake of appetite. It is definitely another matter that the food originally contains huge energy and can nourish itself. It is worth mentioning that Ancient One is not too strong physically and is not as good as Odin of the same level, but her strength in soul and magical attainments are too strong. The strength of the soul is so strong that it can act on the body, reaching the same level as the Heavenly Father. Not to mention these two, Thor has already begun to be able to fight for a long time without eating, also because of his bloodline and divine power. However, he will still be hungry when he should be hungry afterwards. There is no contradiction between the two. Bai Xiao also embarked on this path. He usually eats when he should, maintaining a normal appetite, and enjoying the momentary impact on the taste buds after food is cooked is also a wonderful feeling. People never let go of such wonderful moments. Within a week, Bai Xiao also received news from the two vampire elders whose hearts and wills he controlled, saying that there was a vampire with very pure blood who learned the contents of the Bible and united other vampires and the New York vampire elders. Members of the council, to build the altar of summoning. Make preliminary preparations for summoning Blood God. The purpose is to counterattack New York. In fact, the fundamental reason is to regain the lost base camp. In fact, every city has its own territory. New York is a very special city. It is the most delicious of all the territories in the world. The vampire families occupying this territory are very powerful and powerful. Compared to the vampires of other factions, those are the noblest ones. As a result, just because of Bai Xiao's appearance, they were expelled from New York. This was a huge shame to these vampire families. Their interests were damaged, their reputation was damaged, and a large number of high-level vampires were slaughtered. It would be strange for this group of people to sit still. But they cannot contact vampires from other families without authorization, otherwise they will easily be eaten alive by other families if their strength is damaged. The appearance of the Book of Death gave these vampire families new hope. They united and vowed to fight back to New York and rip off Bai Xiao's skin and cramps. In response to the news from the two evil vampire elders, he could only silently applaud, and even wave flags and shouts behind his back. What others saw might be some kind of disaster coming, but what he saw was just a big ball of life essence. For this reason, he also specifically told the two evil vampire elders to work hard to complete the altar quickly, and then wait for him to harvest it. Bai Xiao was in a happy mood, but when he went out to take out the garbage, he encountered something unpleasant. On this day, he took the garbage bag to the public trash can at the door and had just thrown away the garbage. He suddenly felt a light glare directed at him. This was different from the gaze that ordinary people would glance at themselves unintentionally. This gaze contained murderous intent and malice. He was very calm and turned to look at the source of his sight. About a kilometer ahead of the road, an inconspicuous black car parked on the side of the road. In the driver's seat of the car, a man wearing a peaked cap stared at him piercingly. Bai Xiao suddenly turned his head and met the other person's eyes. Bai Xiao could clearly see across 1,000 meters distance. He saw the other person's expression suddenly change, as if he couldn't believe that he could be discovered even though he was so far away. He was also quite interesting. After being discovered, he did not choose to drive away immediately. Instead, he drove towards Bai Xiao. Bai Xiao just watched quietly. When the other party drove to Bai Xiao and stopped on the side of the road, the man opened the car door and walked out. He confidently walked up to Bai Xiao and looked at her unscrupulously. Nice to meet you, butcher. Chapter 39. This man was dressed simply and plainly. Just an ordinary black jacket and trousers, with a peaked cap on his head, a tough face, and a trim stubble on his chin and upper lip. His body is slender and strong, and his strong temperament makes him look like he is not easy to mess with. Especially those eyes, full of aggression. Most people would be afraid of such eyes, or hate such aggressive eyes, but Bai Xiao was not impatient or angry when he was scanned by such eyes. Instead, it was peaceful. But most of them contained terrible storms beneath this calmness. Just like Bai Xiao now. His eyes were staring at this man, and his black pupils were as bottomless as an abyss, as if they were about to swallow his soul at any time. This man was stared at by Bai Xiao, and fear arose in his heart. His eyes wandered involuntarily, no longer looking into Bai Xiao's eyes. In the end, the man suppressed the instinctive fear in his heart and forced himself to look at each other again. Very nice look. Go back and tell Kingpin that if my identity is revealed, I will make his so-called empire burn to the ground, and death will be just a luxury for you by then. Bai Xiao's powerful spiritual power gave the man in front of him some spiritual hints. After finishing his words, he turned around and walked towards the apartment. As for this man, he stared at Bai Xiao's back. He has always been unruly. If someone else said these words to him, he would definitely kill them in the most cruel way, but now, he doesn't even have the courage to take action. Those quiet pupils lingered in his mind, and he even felt that his body was not under his control. Hell! When Bai Xiao entered the apartment and closed the door, the man cursed under his breath, turned around angrily and kicked the tire of the car behind him hard, then walked to the driver, opened the door and left bitterly. He knew that when fear emerged in him, he had already lost, and lost miserably. The opponent was too powerful, so powerful that he felt suffocated and didn't even have the courage to take action. So he wisely left. But this matter wouldn't end just like that. As the man drove the car, his face gradually became ferocious. This small episode did not affect Bai Xiao. In fact, when that person was discovered by Bai Xiao, his memory had already been read by Bai Xiao. Bai Xiao would never care about a person who had malice and murderous intentions towards him. Privacy. He could name Jinbin and naturally knew the man's identity. A top mercenary and killer, Kingpin, one of the largest gang leaders in New York, was sent to contact and recruit Bullseye. Among the human group, Bullseye has a strong ability to fight alone, and he is also one of Daredevil's biggest enemies. The same is true for Kingpin, a heroic figure. The other party learned that he was massacring gangsters in Queens and showed his strength. Kingpin wanted to recruit him, so he sent Bullseye to investigate and find him. But neither Kingpin nor Bullseye ever thought of one thing at all. From their perspective, Bai Xiao should be just like Bullseye, a top killer and warrior. But the problem is, Bai Xiao is growing so fast that they can't even imagine it. He has already broken away from the category of ordinary humans. The other party's so-called business territory and gang business are now like children playing house in Bai Xiao's eyes, and they are not interested at all. In Bai Xiao's eyes, Kingpin is just a piggy bank. He hadn't gone to find Jinbin yet, but the other party came to him first, which made Bai Xiao feel a little funny. Bullseye didn't kill him because the opponent was dead. After giving Kingpin a big one, he set up the mental suggestion to make the opponent automatically end his life. Kingpin was too lazy to kill the opponent and was talking about a big fat man. How much life essence can be given, it is better to keep it as a piggy bank. Anyway, how much money Jinbin made from his business territory was all prepared for him. As for how Bullseye found him, Bai Xiao was not surprised and didn't care. Bai Xiao was focused on waiting for the blood god to come. Bullseye drove all the way to the Kingpin building in Hell's Kitchen. After parking the car, Bullseye ignored the security and service personnel and took the elevator to Kingpin's office. Knocking on the door, Jinbin's voice came from the other end. Come in. When he opened the door, he saw a spacious and luxurious office. Kingpin was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, wearing a white suit and talking to a man in his 30s wearing glasses. Bullseye knows the identity of this man, James Wesley. He is also Kingpin's most trusted right-hand man. James Wesley and Kingpin finished their work and reported and summarized it, and then stood aside. I failed. Bullseye walked up to Kingpin, looked at the strong man in front of him and said in a deep voice. Ha, this is really interesting news. Did you kill him? Kingpin was holding a cigar in his mouth, holding his cane with his other hand, and said with interest. No, I. Bullseye wanted to say something more, but then he saw a sudden change in his eyes, and a majestic spiritual power bloomed inexplicably. From Jinbin's perspective, the world in front of him suddenly became distorted, and eventually turned into darkness and darkness. Chaos. As the most cruel gang leader, Kingpin's character and will were far beyond those of ordinary people. He did not panic or be afraid, but stood there with a frown on his face. At this moment, a pair of huge amounts of eyes suddenly appeared in the sky of the dark world, cold and ruthless, as if gods were looking down on mortals. Butcher. The moment he saw these eyes, Jinbin immediately felt something, raised his head and said in a deep voice. We can talk. Kingpin tried to communicate, but there were huge amounts of sound in his ears, bombarding his ears like a bell. You should expect me to forget you, Kingpin. Chapter 40. The sound was like the roar of a demon, causing severe and bone-chilling pain to surge through Jinbin's brain. I don't know how much time passed before the stinging pain slowly disappeared. His eyes lit up, and the chaotic and dark colors slowly dissipated, and he returned to reality. Then, the scene in front of him filled Jinpin's plump face with gloom and shock. I saw in front of me that Bullseye, who was standing there, was already lying in a pool of blood. There were obvious blood stains on his forehead and chest. His eyes were full of disbelief. Kingpin raised his hand slightly and saw a pistol appearing in his hand. Next to him, James Wesley staggered back a few steps, looking at him with horror in his eyes, as if he didn't know why Kingpin would suddenly go crazy and kill Bullseye, whom he personally recruited. So, is this a warning to me? Kingpin held his cigar in his mouth and spat out these words from between his teeth. Fisk, you were just now. James Wesley calmed down, looked at Kingpin for a moment, and then spoke. But before he finished speaking, there was a noise outside the door. James Wesley turned his head and glanced at Kingpin, who had a gloomy face and said nothing. He walked to the office door and opened it. On the other side of the door were densely packed gunmen with weapons raised, ready to rush in at any time. Apparently they had heard the sound of shooting before and thought something might have happened in Kingpin's office, so they couldn't wait to break in. You come in, the others go out. As Kingpin's right-hand man, James Wesley was considered a high-level person in front of these gunmen. He calmed down the commotion with a few words, pointed at the two gunmen and let them enter the office. When the two gunmen entered the office, they saw Bullseye lying in a pool of blood in front of the spacious office. The blood hole on his forehead proved that the other person was dead. Looking at the sullen leader and the gun in his hand, I was so frightened that I almost stopped breathing. Fortunately, James Wesley directed the two men to carry the dead Bullseye down and take it to the building's special freezer to freeze it. Neither of them dared to look at Kingpin, so they hurriedly carried Bullseye's body out of the office. Wait until the gate closes here. James Wesley continued to look at Kingpin and said in surprise, what happened between you two? Fisk, why did you suddenly kill Bullseye? He simply couldn't figure out why Kingpin would suddenly snatch away the gun from Bullseye, point it at the opponent's head and chest, and pull the trigger continuously without any mercy. His indifferent expression seemed like a puppet being controlled by someone. And what's even more strange is that Bullseye didn't even resist, just waiting for the bullet to come. Moreover, with Bullseye's character, he was just a mercenary recruited by Kingpin. Kingpin issued tasks, and Bullseye completed them and received the bounty. The two sides have cooperated closely over the years, and Kingpin has said many times that Bullseye will be one of his most effective assistants. However, Bullseye came to the office today and said something to Kingpin without thinking. Kingpin replied and shot the other person. This direction was simply beyond his comprehension. Butcher. Kingpin turned and walked to the desk, put the gun gently on the desk, took the cigar and crushed it gently in the ashtray, then looked at James Wesley and uttered a word. Butcher? Butcher in Queens. James Wesley said doubtfully. Bullseye's mission this time is to find the butcher and recruit him. If he fails to recruit him, he will be killed. James Wesley suddenly realized that Bullseye and Kingpin's words just now would make everything clear, but then he became even more confused. This is all normal, then. The butcher took control of me and Bullseye at some point. This is the warning he gave me, James. Jinbing's plump face became more ferocious, and the anger in his eyes seemed to burn everything in front of him. He is provoking me. Especially as his mind kept replaying that sentence. You should expect me to forget you, Kingpin. These words were like sharp swords piercing his heart, making his heart bleed. It was a great humiliation. How could Kingpin, who has become one of the largest gang leaders in New York, not be angry. He has always been the only one to control the fate of others. There has never been anyone like the butcher. His contemptuous and indifferent words are like a god treating an ant that can be crushed at any time. Kingpin almost lost his mind in anger. Fisk. After James Wesley sorted everything out, he looked at Kingpin with a serious and solemn expression. Should I remind you? Anger is the beginning of the abyss. Kingpin's anger was like a bucket of cold water being poured on him after James Weiss's words, which made his anger fade away and his reason regain the upper hand. His constantly heaving chest calmed down, and he slowly sat on the office chair with his cane and closed his eyes. James Wesley stood aside and watched until a minute later. Kingpin opened his eyes again. Anger is the beginning of a person's death. He repeated this sentence, then smiled and laughed, and the rich laughter echoed throughout the entire office of the University of Nottingham. James Wesley finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that he was both an employer and a friend. He also knew that at the moment Kingpin had calmed down. Thank you for the reminder, my friend, and I'm glad you've always been on my side. Kingpin looked at James Wesley seriously. The latter shook his head. You know I never like to participate in these things, but the business landscape needs a calm support from you. If you lose yourself because of anger, then I will leave you as promised in the past. Kingpin nodded, looked at the pool of blood on the carpet in front of him, and said in a low voice, I have never lacked patience, James. Time will verify everything. No one can humiliate me in this way, not even an order. Butcher of the gods. Our game has just begun. I'm looking forward to the moment when he kneels down in front of me. I'll wait and see, James said with a smile. The calm, bloodthirsty, and patient Kingpin was the person he knew. I need someone who can answer my questions. I want to know how the other party controls Bullseye and me. Kingpin's eyes were full of solemnity. It just so happens that I can help you contact someone. Chapter 41. There is a farm about 10 kilometers away from New York. The farm covers a very large area, surrounded by an old manor that is not small, surrounded by wide fields, but it looks a little gloomy and desolate, because it has been abandoned for a long time. In the gloomy and dark manor, the furniture was turned over, and many craters could be seen, and the diffuse smoke told of a fierce battle that had just taken place. There were piles of unknown ashes on the wooden floor. Blade wore his unchanged equipment for several years, a black windbreaker with a tight lining and leather pants, sunglasses on his eyes, and a sharp sword in his hand. He pierced the last vampire in front of him expressionlessly. This young and handsome vampire burned himself and turned into ashes with a scream, leaving only the last curse. When the blood god comes, you and those hunters will be torn to pieces by him, and you will become a sacrifice, Blade. I look forward to your final outcome. Blade made a sword flower and put the sword back behind his back. He turned his head and looked at the fully armed white-haired old man who walked in with a special short-barreled shotgun. Did you hear it? He shouted so loudly. Although my hearing is impaired, it doesn't mean that I can't hear it, Blade. Do you think he is telling the truth, Whistler? Blade's eyes behind the sunglasses flashed with sharpness. The old man shook his head. I don't want to believe this kind of thing, but we have destroyed 4 gathering places of these bastards. Their statements are completely consistent. I think it is likely to be true. What the hell, I thought I was going to be laid off, but I didn't expect this to happen now. The contents recorded in the Book of the Dead have attracted these lingering vampires. They are indeed building the altar for the summoning ceremony. Blade didn't speak. The old man glanced at him and felt his abnormality. What do you feel? Uneasy, strong uneasiness. Blade said in a low voice. They are delaying our steps, Whistler. The old man frowned. Do you think they took the initiative to let us find these gathering places? In the past, they avoided me and hid on their own initiative, but now, they have been expelled. Not only did they not leave the scope of New York, they also set up gathering places nearby to actively attract us to their door. Whistler, I don't think they will be so stupid. Blade is not a reckless man. On the contrary, he is very smart. The various experiences in these days have made him realize that something is wrong. Originally, he thought that the vampire families who lost their territory in New York would fight with the vampires in the cities around New York for their survival territory. Logically, this possibility was very high. Now, this possibility has been broken. When he thought about the contents of the Book of the Dead from these vampires, it was obvious that summoning the blood god was the truth. Blade, I feel that this is more like a trap. Whistler shook his head. his expression serious and heavy. This kind of confidential matter must be kept absolutely confidential, but we can easily learn about it from these vampires. Don't you think it's weird? Even if it's a trap, you know I can't just sit back and watch. How could Blade not know? But this is simply an open conspiracy. The other party is clearly telling Blade that I am going to summon the blood god. If you have the ability, come and stop me. Anyway, I must have set a lot of traps for you. Are you coming? If you don't come, I will successfully summon the blood god. If you come, I will use the backhands I set to greet you one by one. It was more like a dilemma. If he didn't go, the blood god would descend, disasters would happen, and humanity would suffer. If he went, Blade knew that he would most likely die. Blade hated vampires, so he had no choice between these two options, without even a second of hesitation. You and your father are really similar in character. Whistler was helpless. Blade was his former friend and the child of a vampire hunter. However, an accident turned Blade's mother into a vampire, and he finally waited for the news of his mother's death. Blade's father went crazy for revenge for his wife. Even though he knew it was a trap, he still did everything he could. As a friend, Whistler also fought side by side with him. In the end, Blade's father died to save Whistler, who was in crisis. He adopted Blade and trained Blade. Blade also knew his life experience. Since then, he hated vampires and embarked on the path of a hunter. But now, such a thing happened again. Whistler didn't stop him, but noticing Blade's gaze, he immediately raised the shotgun in his hand. When I was hunting vampires, you were still in your mother's womb, you little brat. I am a top vampire hunter. The meaning of my life is to die on the road of hunting vampires. If you want to stop me, then be prepared for me to kick your a. Whistler cursed. He has always been a good man, and his temper is irritable, which is the character of a top vampire hunter. Even if he is old, it is still the same. Blade's mouth curved, then let's embark on the road of death together. A tragic atmosphere of calmly going to death spread. Maybe we can find another helper, Blade. Whistler suddenly broke the tragic atmosphere and said thoughtfully. Are you talking about the guy who drives vampires away in New York? Blade raised his eyebrows. Since he has the ability to massacre vampires, his ability is beyond doubt, but doesn't he know about the Book of the Dead? Whistler was a little confused. Is he waiting for the summoning ceremony to succeed? Whistler was shocked by this bold idea. How could this be possible? The two sides have completely different positions. The other side has no reason to let the blood god come, otherwise the person who would be retaliated against would definitely be the first. Do you have any news about him? He is very low-key. My well-informed friends can't find any clues. Maybe he can give us some surprises. Blade's eyes flickered, as if he guessed something. Chapter 42. It was a surprise indeed. In an extremely secluded suburb 30 kilometers away from New York, Xiao stands on a towering rock wall a few kilometers away from this area, overlooking the seemingly deserted area below. The surrounding environment here is very special. Deep in the dense jungle, surrounded by hills, ordinary people will definitely get lost when they come here. However, there are many such places in the suburbs of New York. There is a road leading to New York about 1 kilometer away. Driving people don't care here either. Even if he really couldn't help but want to explore, it would be impossible for Roaches to beat the dog, because Xiao could clearly feel that there were probably thousands of vampires under the ground in that area. And the bloodline is very pure. A wave of dungeon experience surprised Xiao. It can only be said that these vampire families have a good background. Even if they escaped, they took away a large number of blood slaves and blood bags. It also supplies its own food needs. Master, the person who led the construction of the summoning ceremony is Dickon Frost, who was elected by the Blood Clan Elders Council in New York. He is now the leader of the Blood Clan, and he also presided over the construction of the summoning altar. Behind him, a decent-looking vampire elder wearing a black tuxedo said respectfully, his eyes full of reverence for Xiao. He is one of the inner ghost elders controlled by Xiao with his spiritual power. Also holds a place in the Vampire Council. With the push of him and another mole elder, the summoning ceremony went so smoothly. They also pushed many Blood Clan families to gather here, waiting for their great master to harvest leeks. They are definitely one of the leeks, but they have a spirit of dedication and believe that risking their own lives is the greatest and noblest act. Other Blood Clan members should also sacrifice their lives for their masters. Xiao was very pleased. He decided that after the other vampires and blood gods died, he would finally kill these two elders and dedicate his life and money to himself. It was so great. He could hardly help but shed 2 drops of crocodile tears. But before the drops started to fall, he suddenly turned his head and looked over the gaps in the dense jungle. On the road about 3 kilometers away, a Ford-modified muscle sports car was driving over. He felt an aura that was different from other vampires. And an old human man? Through the car window, he saw the appearance and clothing of the 2 people, especially the black man driving the muscle car, whose dress was too classic. It also made Xiao recognize him at a glance, Blade Warrior. Dickon Frost needed sacrifices to summon the blood god. Daywalker's blood is very special, so he decided to make him one of the sacrifices. He set up 5 blood clan gathering places outside and revealed to him about the blood god, attracting Daywalker to find this place. The ghost elder did not have Xiao's super senses, but when he heard about Blade, he told everything he knew. Xiao immediately covered his heart, feeling that his heart ached. This Dickon Frost had a right to die, and actually sent so many heads to Blade. I wonder if this was all based on his experience. By the way, there was something wrong with the way he looked at Blade, wondering whether he should give Blade a beating. Considering that this guy is just half ghost and half human, his identity is hard to define, and everything he does is to eliminate vampires, he, an open-minded person like him, plans to let this guy go. So, those traps prepared underground are all prepared for this guy. Yes, great master. Nice idea. Xiao was satisfied. The blood clan wanted to attack him, and his blood was needed to summon the blood god, so he was ready to watch indifferently. It was not that he was indifferent, but that the main thing was to let the blood god come smoothly. Best of both worlds. Go, inform that guy named Dickon that Blade is coming. Let your people die less, preferably not at all. They are all mine. By the way, if the human being is allowed to die, just lock him up. Yes, after the ghost elder said a word of respect, the figure disappeared in place like a ghost. It was afternoon time now, and I don't know if it was because the blood god was about to come. The weather was covered with dark clouds. Although it was not raining, there was no sun. This is why the inner ghost elder can appear in broad daylight. Watching the black figure running quickly towards the gathering place, Xiao stood there, waiting silently. As expected, the dungeon will be opened this evening, and a wave of experience will be credited to him. He is too patient to wait. He glanced at the silver cross sword stuck upside down on the ground in front of him. This was to kill the blood god copy. To be on the safe side, a few days ago he specially used that large piece of adamantium to have a factory build the sword overnight. The sword body was naturally coated with silver powder. In order to speed up the progress, he also paid a large sum of extra money. US dollars. He happily whistled the beautiful melody of Fat William's Castle. 4 kilometers, a black Ford-modified muscle car was speeding on the road. The dark clouds were rolling in the sky behind it. The cold world was particularly eerie. Inside the car, Blade was driving the sports car, and the co-pilot, an old white-haired man, Whistler, was preparing everything. Checking the equipment he brought. This weather is so damn bad. Whistler glanced at the dark cloud-filled sky above the car window and couldn't help but curse under his breath. They came today, and the weather without sunshine was not favorable to them. He opened a map and looked at the location drawn on the map. Next, Blade would be the main force, and he was still the same, providing help and support behind Blade. Blade drove the car with a look of solemnity on his face. After driving for more than 10 minutes, he stepped on the brakes and the sports car stopped beside the highway. He looked out the side window and saw the dense jungle in the distance. I really like this environment so much. It reminds me of the scene when you and your father were hunting an elder vampire in the jungle. Seeing such a scene, Whistler let out a wow. Are you ready to die, Whistler? Definitely, don't die in front of me, Blade. Whistler took out an old-fashioned sniper rifle from the side. His body was already covered with equipment. Then let's go. The car door opened, Blade and Whistler stepped over the railing and walked deep into the jungle in the distance until the branches and leaves of the trees swallowed their figures. Chapter 43. Inside the underground, a huge primitive space was built. It covers an area of tens of thousands of square meters and is hundreds of meters deep. Supported by various stone pillars, they are carved with mysterious lines and passages extending in all directions. The few remaining thousands of vampires in New York live here, and there are also many blood food and freezers dedicated to storing blood bags. The Blood Clan, with their astonishing background, spends a lot of dollars and manpower exchanging money and manpower for time efficiency. It's almost like building a miraculous underground cave in a short time. The walls of the passage were covered with kerosene lamps, and their dim yellow light illuminated the dark underground, giving some light to the cold underground. At the deepest point, there stood an altar that was not too big. 12 round stone pillars stood on both sides of the circular altar, and 12 deep lines were carved on the altar. This is also known as the Temple of Eternal Night. A group of vampires stood on the passage built around it, looking at the current leader of the Blood Clan, Dickon and Frost, a young and handsome vampire on the altar, wearing a suit and a white shirt, with the chest the front buttons are open to reveal some skin, making it look a little sy. Dickon Frost stood on the altar in high spirits, with the elders of the Council of Elders behind him. He raised his head slightly and glanced left and right at the Blood Clan compatriots stained in the passages on the edges of the walls on both sides. He said impassionedly, "My Blood Clan compatriots, we are the noble Blood Clan. We have been inherited for thousands of years. We were once glorious. Let Blood Clan's reputation spread to the world. But since the rise of mankind, we have begun to hide, and the former Blood Eaters have become the masters of this world. Now, a damn human butcher is forcing us to flee our homeland and trample our glory. We can only hide in the jungle like mice. We want to regain our former glory, summon the Blood God, and let the Blood God lead us to glory, make the world surrender at our feet, and evoke the deepest fear that humans once had against us." The passionate words sounded like bells in the depths of the souls of all vampires, awakening the pride in their souls. They are the great Blood Clan, an immortal race. How can they hide because of humans? They should be the masters of the world. These vampires opened their mouths, revealing their sharp fangs, and looked ferocious. Let out a shocking roar. Roar! The terrifying sound echoed throughout the underground. Dickon Frost raised his head slightly, closed his eyes, and opened his arms. He was enjoying this moment. No one knew that he would become a god tonight. At this time, a vampire elder came over. In the eyes of everyone, the elder said to the concave-shaped Dickon Frost, "Blade is here," and he brought an old hunter with him. And this elder is clearly the mole elder whose mind is controlled by Xiao. Dickon didn't know this. He slowly opened his eyes, turned to look at the elders and other elders, and said with a grin, "He is indeed here. The last elect is in place. If you catch him, I will live." The vampire elders nodded and turned to leave. Elders hold high positions, but they are also vampires with the purest blood. Their combat power is much stronger than ordinary vampires. In an instant, deep underground, the vampires were quietly waiting for the hunter to step into the trap prepared for him. Dickon asked his right-hand men to go to another place where there was a mold specially built to squeeze out the blood of the last elect. At the entrance of the underground passage, Blade and Whistler stepped inside. The long passage was empty, and the oil lamps on the walls on both sides were automatically lit. Blade and Whistler looked at each other, stepped on the stairs and went down step by step, walking along the passage. When they stepped into the end of the passage, there was an extremely wide field in front of them. "The elders and thousands of vampires have already been waiting here. You really don't give me any chance." Whistler said helplessly that after he and Blade originally planned to enter here, he would find a suitable location by himself, hide at a suitable sniper point, and provide remote support to Blade. But before the plan even started, a large number of vampires blocked the door. Click! Blade pulled the tubular magazine of the shotgun and loaded the bullet. Whistler put the sniper rifle behind his back and picked up the shotgun from his waist. There is no doubt that sniper rifles are of little use in this kind of crowded battle, but the shotgun, the magic weapon of group battles, is the eternal god. The battle was about to break out, but the ghost elder suddenly stepped on a raised part of the ground. Blade and Whistler's eyes changed, and they immediately felt that something was wrong. They both rolled to both sides suddenly. Unfortunately, Whistler was old after all, and was not strong enough behind him. He saw the stones on the floor where he was originally standing. It sank, revealing a bottomless pit. Whistler still fell downwards. Below is a long slope slide. Whistler's body slid downward uncontrollably. Blade avoided the trap and instinctively reached out to catch Whistler first, but it was too late. And he also paid the price for his extra actions. Seeing a whistling sound coming from his ears, Blade turned his head suddenly. There was no time to be angry that Whistler fell into the trap, because several vampire elders had already rushed in front of him with ghostly speed. Blade was too experienced in actual combat, so he immediately transformed his body that was originally full of flaws. He stepped hard, leaned back, and lay back in midair, holding the shotgun and pulling the trigger. However, for some reason, at the moment he pulled the trigger, his body seemed to lose control, and he did not pull the trigger at this critical moment. At this moment, the two mole elders seized the opportunity. The first one rushed to remove the shotgun from Blade's hand, and the other one grabbed Blade's neck, raised his knee and hit his lower back. Click! A crisp sound sounded, and Blade's lower lumbar spine was severely injured and broken. Blade's face immediately turned painful. He still wanted to fight back, but unfortunately the other vampire elders would not let go of this opportunity, and swarmed up and broke Blade's hand. No bones in the feet. Blade was captured alive. Blade couldn't help but close his eyes behind his sunglasses. He and Whistler's generous death seemed like a joke at this moment. Chapter 44. Wow, look who this is! The famous Daywalker, Blade Warrior. I didn't expect him to be in such a mess. In the blood-grinding room, one of Dickens' male vampires with golden hair exaggeratedly looked at the Blade Warrior who had his shirt taken off, revealing his strong muscles. Blade's limbs were broken, and his whole body was embedded in half of the grinding tool. He stared at the vampire with cold eyes, contempt, and indifference. The male vampire watching was furious. He stretched out his hand, placed his sharp nails on Blade's chest, and swiped gently. 5 blood stains appeared on the strong muscles of the black skin. Blade's expression didn't change, and he just watched quietly. This made the vampire quite boring. He didn't even think about torture. He only left one sentence: I will look forward to the scene of your painful death. After saying that, he left the stone room. Blade closed his eyes, knowing that all his efforts had been in vain, but he didn't know that the old guy Whistler was still alive. At the same time, at the underground passage, Xiao carried the cross-sword and walked down the steps and walked to the inside of the underground. With the memory of the Ghost Elder, there were passages that seemed to be like a maze in all directions. It was not difficult for him. Along the way, such a big thorn is heading towards the Eternal Night Temple. They didn't encounter any vampires along the way. These vampires all went to the Eternal Night Temple to participate in the important moment of the arrival of the Blood God. Walking all the way to the Eternal Night Temple, looking at the dense crowd of vampires in the passage, Xiao walked over directly. There wasn't even a squeeze. The power of the mind controlled the field, causing the vampires in front of him to automatically separate a path. Xiao just stood at the forefront, casually thrusting his sword into the ground, like a lion blending into the flock, watching with interest. The protagonist on the altar below, or the prey. An alien like him can be easily discovered among vampires who have a keen sense of smell for blood. With his level of life, his blood contains tremendous energy, which is comparable to a hungry wolf seeing fresh and delicious raw meat that is still dripping with blood. However, Xiao's collective mind suggested that all the vampires, including Dickon Frost who was waiting for time on the altar, would subconsciously regard him as a compatriot and ignore him. This is to manipulate the nervous system through psychic power and forcibly suppress one's own ability. This ability by Xiao can only be said to be very useful and must be developed more in the future. The lion in sheep's clothing just moved a small bench and held a handful of melon seeds. He glanced towards the opposite upper wall. Behind the wall, he knew that the Blade Warrior was in the specially built stone room. It was estimated that this person I'm still feeling depressed. The other party still doesn't know why he was caught so easily. Xiao would not tell him that the moment he saw Blade, he injected some spiritual hints into him. Blade Warriors were supposed to be calm when facing a crisis, not to mention killing everyone, but also to delay for a while. But in the end he became Joker under the intervention of Xiao. It was impossible for him to apologize. Anyway, as long as he didn't say anything about it, no one would know. As night fell, the time came, and the originally noisy sounds suddenly disappeared. Blade on the other side of the stone room was covered by the last half of the grinding tool, with only his hands exposed. The needles in the grinding tool pierced Blade's body, and with a sound there was a muffled sound, and blood flowed from his body to the ground along the needle pricks. Daywalker's special blood contains tremendous power that no other vampire has. Because he has properties that only the vampire ancestor level can possess, he is not afraid of solar radiation. Deacon stood alone on the altar. On the lines on the ceiling, the blood of Blade condensed and was compressed into a drop of the purest blood by the mysterious power. In an instant, the terrifying thunder and lightning suddenly resounded. Above the surface of the earth, under the cover of darkness, terrible dark clouds rolled, and dazzling and strange lightning exploded wildly, as if foreshadowing the coming of disaster. In the Temple of Eternal Night, the drop of blood dripped slowly. Deacon raised his head and opened his mouth. The moment the blood fell into his mouth, the mysterious lines on the ground of the altar emitted a fierce light. The mysterious lines on the 12 stone pillars on the surrounding walls were the same. Thunders fell from the sky, penetrated the surface, and struck the 12 pure vampires standing in front of the stone pillars. The vampires' bodies were blown to pieces by the thunder, and the blood turned into blood-colored bats, flapping their wings, and crashed into Deacon's body in the excited eyes of all the vampires. Boom! Under Xiao's increasingly excited gaze, he felt the terrifying energy erupting from Deacon's body, turning into a storm that swept across the entire Temple of Eternal Night. The terrifying pressure was like the resurrection of the ancient Blood Clan ancestor, making all the vampires kneel down in submission, and everyone's face was full of reverence. The temperament seemed to expand rapidly as if there was no end. Bai Xiao's eyes were bright, and he was more and more happy. At the same time, in the stone chamber, the terrifying storm also swept to Blade's side. Blade's eyes were full of bitterness. He felt powerless. He hated his powerlessness. He was now trapped and lost a lot of blood. His life was gradually coming to an end. Is his fate here? No. Outside the stone chamber, Blade suddenly heard clear footsteps, although slow, but slowly approaching the stone chamber. After so many years together, although he couldn't see, Blade immediately heard who the owner of the footsteps was. Whistler. So this old guy is not dead yet? With a muffled sound, the mold in front of him was automatically opened. Blade was still embedded in the other half of the mold, but Whistler also appeared in front of him. He was a little embarrassed and dirty, and his right foot seemed to be injured and staggering, but he held 2 blood bags in his hands. Are you happy to see me, little brat? You always need me at critical moments. That's right, old man, I always need you. Blade, who was as cold as a lyre, smiled brightly for the first time in his life. Whistler rolled his eyes in annoyance, and stepped forward with difficulty in the face of the terrifying storm of pressure. At Blade's signal, he found the mechanism button and freed Blade from the mold. Blade, who lost a lot of blood, fell to the ground, and Whistler quickly stuffed the blood bag into Blade's mouth. We haven't completely failed, Blade. Chapter 45. Blade frantically consumed 2 blood bags of frozen donated blood to replace the blood he had lost. Soon, under the influence of blood, Blade regained its strength and self-healed the punctured wound. Blade stood up. Whistler handed him the katana found behind him that belonged to Blade. Boy, it's not a good habit to throw things away. In addition to katana, there are 2 guns and several tubes of serum previously made specifically to target vampires. However, without clothes, Blade could only fight wearing his skin, but Whistler didn't care about this. He, an old man, was injured, and despite the blood god's soaring momentum, he searched for Blade all the way, and had already let Whistler with all his strength. He leaned on the grinding tool beside him, breathing hard. There was pain on the old face. Do what you have to do, Blade, there's only so much I can do. Blade nodded, holding katana in one hand, and wrapped the serum wrapped around his belt around his waist. He held the shotgun in the other hand, looked at the stone wall beside him, twisted his neck, and felt his body. With the vigorous energy in his body, he opened his legs and accelerated wildly. Whistler looked at him like an idiot. Like a tank, he smashed the thick wall with his shoulders. With a loud noise, his burly and strong figure was surrounded by rubble and smoke all over the sky. He fell towards the altar below like a hero on stage. Do you have to fly in such a rough way? Damn it! Whistler cursed in a low voice. He would not envy Blade's powerful and human body. Blade roared over there. Dickon Frost. He held a shotgun in his left hand, pointed it at Dickon below him in midair, and pulled the trigger. Bang! Explosive sparks exploded in the muzzle of the shotgun, and densely packed specially made silver steel balls were like scattered flowers. However, in Blade's shocked eyes, he saw Dickon raising his head, his eyes blood red, looking at him with contempt, moving. Didn't move. A blood-colored light curtain enveloped Dickon's body. Silver steel balls all over the sky hit the blood-colored light curtain, causing ripples. Then they were corroded by the surging blood-colored energy and turned into a ball of molten iron dripping down. Blade landed on the altar and looked at Dickon, who was staring at him like a joker. He held katana tightly. The surging aura, the pure and terrifying pressure, aroused Blade's fear derived from blood. This is the traditional blood suppression among vampires, the unconditional suppression of the inferior by the superior. At the moment Dickon, in the ritual summons, became the ancestor-level blood god and the source of all vampires. Blade is half human and half vampire, so naturally he will be suppressed. He won't lose the courage to resist like other vampires and let others slaughter him, but his combat effectiveness and strength will also be greatly suppressed. However, Blade was fearless and stared at Dickon with a terrifying cold murderous intent in his eyes. He is the bravest warrior, the Blade Warrior. Facing the menacing Blade, Dickon didn't pay attention immediately. Instead, he raised his head slightly and looked in another direction. The only person in the passage who didn't kneel on the ground was a stranger. You have been there since the beginning, but you are waiting for me to come. Should I call you stupid or smart? I can give you a chance, human, kneel at my feet, and I can grant you eternal life. Dickon, or the blood god, came to consciousness, crossed over to this body, occupied his body, and obtained all of Dickon's original memories. The powerful power and will belonging to the blood god shattered the hidden trace. Psychic power, since a human has quietly sneaked into the temple of Evernight. And he never tried to stop him, but just watched him coming. In particular, there was an unusual aura coming from the opponent's body, which made the blood god feel the danger. However, the blood god was extremely confident in his own power. He believed that a mere human could not be his opponent. So he still upholds the arrogance of blood god. Blade heard Dickon's words throughout and realized that Dickon in front of him had been occupied by the blood god. He turned his head and looked from the blood god's perspective, and saw all the vampires trembling on the ground in the passage above. And he was wearing a black coat, black lining, and a round hat, with a sharp silver cross sword stuck upside down on the ground. The dark eyes looked down quietly, looking at the blood god. A very young Asian, and even from his perspective, he is a very handsome boy. Facing the blood god's powerful aura, he did not show any fear, but instead had a unique confidence. The information conveyed by that look made Blade feel a sense of familiarity, just like the look in his eyes when he was hunting vampires. The way you look at prey. Blade couldn't help but have a guess in his mind. He looked at the Asian boy in shock, and his heart suddenly stirred up waves. He was the one who suddenly appeared in New York, hunted vampires crazily, and forced all the vampires living in New York to flee. Blade and Whistler had previously guessed that Dickon and other vampires were planning to summon the blood god. It was impossible that this person would not come. He must be paying attention to this matter and even take action at a critical moment. It's just that their guess was right, but the result was wrong. He actually sneaked into the Eternal Night Temple early and watched the blood god coming. Was it the blood god that the other party wanted to hunt from the beginning to the end? Damn it, this kid has such confidence. Blade couldn't help but curse secretly in his heart. With his character, he would never do such a thing with serious consequences, but now no matter what, the blood god has come and cannot be changed. He just hoped that the boy wasn't an arrogant man with no power. The boy was definitely by Xiao. He looked down at the blood god, and the corners of his mouth curled up when the other person's arrogance was like a gift. Eternal life? How can a prey talk about eternal life? After he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand, a bright golden light bloomed in his palm, and then he slapped the ground hard. Boom! The surging golden wave swept across the entire Eternal Night Temple in an instant. The golden torrent washed around the 3 circular passages up and down the Eternal Night Temple. All the vampires crawling on the passages were swallowed up in this moment and disappeared in an instant. The Eternal Night Temple shook crazily, and rubble and smoke continued to scatter from the ceiling and surrounding walls. Chapter 46. The candle light blew in the wind, and the majestic golden vortex rushed through the 3 circular passages on the wall of the Eternal Night Temple, as if blooming like a golden vortex. Even if the blood gods Dickon and Blade on the altar were not in direct contact with the majestic golden energy, they were in the center of the golden vortex, burning their skin and blood like the sun. Both of them have the characteristic of not being afraid of solar energy radiation. But after all, it was just solar energy radiation from a distance of 149.5 million kilometers, and the golden magic power produced by Xiao was only less than 50 meters away from them. It was not injured, but the surface of the skin was burned and left burn marks. The Blade Warrior couldn't help but raise his hands in front of his eyes to block the dazzling light. A blood-colored film flowed on the surface of blood god Dickon's body to protect himself. The original contempt and arrogance on his face were gone forever. He glanced at the figures disappearing in the golden energy vortex, and his face became ugly. Although he doesn't care about those weak blood clan, after all, he came to the world and needs manpower. It takes time to transform a blood clan, especially a pure blood clan. What's more, he can make the opponent kneel at his feet with his front foot, and he will grant him eternal life. With his back foot, the opponent can use his ultimate move to wipe out thousands of blood clan. This is no ordinary humiliation and slap in the face. The golden energy vortex didn't last long before it was gradually evaluated. The candle light racing on the oil lamp on the edge of the wall calmed down, and you could vaguely see little golden stars floating in the air. It was really beautiful. Bai Xiao stood up, in the same posture as Dickon before, with his arms spread wide and his head slightly raised, as if embracing the world. Most of the vampires here are purebreds, and their life levels are much higher than those of vampires with mixed bloodlines, including many elders. From his perspective, he could see the blood-colored essence light clusters as large as file size gathering together, turning into a long river of blood and pouring into his body. In just a few seconds, his life level once again experienced a leap. The blood was rushing, the surging magic power was like a surging tide, and the vitality gave his body a new luster. Muscles, bones, internal organs, cells, brain nerves, etc. have all strengthened a lot. Bai Xiao was happy. There was a big question mark on Blood God Dickon's forehead. He was completely confused. Bai Xiao's life level jumped completely. The result was that the tyrannical momentum from the beginning actually started to rise at an alarming rate. Sword. He didn't understand the cause and effect relationship here. He didn't know that Bai Xiao could kill people and become stronger. He thought that Bai Xiao killed thousands of blood clan in an instant, which aroused excitement and caused him to lose control of himself and become furious. Is this man a berserker? Whether it's fighting or killing, it can make you excited. The blood god was really unsure this time. Bai Xiao showed his strength at first and killed thousands of blood clan. He was still able to maintain his posture. After all, momentum is closely related to original strength and will. He roughly estimated that the advantage lies with him. After all, as a blood god at the level of the ancestor, there are not too many ancient gods that he has seen before, and Bai Xiao seems childish. But then the momentum skyrocketed without any reason, and it felt like the offense and defense were about to change, and the situation was reversed. There is no need to worry about the difference in strength in battle. As long as it is not too big, it is possible to turn the tables through tactics, combat IQ, etc. But I am afraid that I will fight against an opponent with the attributes of a berserker. The blow was so good that it could even hold down the hammer. How wonderful is that? But I'm afraid that if I hammer the opponent, he will either become impatient and his strength will increase unreasonably, or the person who is hammering will become excited and his strength will increase unreasonably, or maybe he will hit a certain part of the person, which happens to be it hit someone's GT, and the strength skyrocketed. Who can stand up to this kind of unreasonableness? The situation on Blood God Dickon's side is that before this was done, the other party started to be unreasonable, so why not give him a hammer? The Blood God already wants to run away and no longer plans to play with Bai Xiao. The madman still can't afford to offend him. The Blood God wanted to run away, but Bai Xiao didn't want to. Those thousands of vampires were just desserts, and Blood God was the main meal. Bai Xiao reached out and grabbed the adamantium cross-sword that was stuck upside down on the ground in front of him. It exploded with terrifying explosive force, cracking the ground, and making a roar that tore through the air. Came, Blood God, Blade's pupil shrank. Bai Xiao actually appeared in front of the two of them, with his body less than 1 meter above the Blood God. He held the cross-sword high, and the golden light and shadow on the sword body flowed, as if it had turned into a golden sword. Damn it! The Blood God raised his head slightly, his blood-colored pupils reflected the other party's indifferent face and raised the cross-sword, and his hands instantly opened. The blood magic that belongs exclusively to the ancestor Blood God reappears in the world. Boom! I saw a huge circular pattern of blood flowing on the altar floor. It was cold, mysterious, and strange. It seemed like it could drain people's blood cleanly with just one look. Immediately, a raging bloody craze erupted from the magic circle like a fountain. Blade felt the terror threat. The moment the magic circle lit up, he immediately opened his legs and tried to escape from the altar, but it was too late. A raging bloody tide surged up, as if it was the most evil blood from the depths of hell. Filled with filth, horror, and darkness, constantly washing over his body. Katana and the shotgun in his hand were corroded by the wash of blood. Blade's skin seemed to be cut into pieces with thousands of knives, and there were numerous dense wounds all over his body. The blood was flowing, and the flowing blood was absorbed and transformed by the magic circle, constantly attacking Blade. Roar! The skin, muscles, bones, and internal organs were washed away by the filthy blood, and the pain was like being cut into pieces by 1,000 cuts. This tough guy couldn't bear it. The extreme pain made him roar, and his eyeballs became bloodshot. Blade was only affected, but the person really attacked by this blood magic was Xiao. Xiao faced the bloody craze without any hesitation. The magic power in his body surged into the cross sword made of adamantium, and the sword body completely turned into gold. Brilliant golden light illuminates the Evernight Temple. He held the golden sword high in the air like a majestic figure slaughtering gods. The blood god below raised his head and glared at the looming figure wrapped in the blood craze. Next to him, Blade's appearance, washing in blood and roaring in pain, seemed to be frozen at this moment. Chapter 47. Boom! Lightning rolled in the sky, and the dark clouds were covered by the sea of thunder. Endless lightning exploded wildly, causing the world to cycle from darkness and light. The ground and the hills suddenly shook with a violent roar. The mountain and the ground seemed to have encountered a major earthquake. The mountain cracked, and the dense cracks spread like huge amounts of spider webs. The animals and birds inside screamed in fear and fled. Instinct drove them to escape from the terrible restricted area over there. And the source of all this, in the Eternal Night Temple under the surface, Blade smashed upwards like a cannonball, directly hitting the wall of the cave passage on the second floor. A huge amount of pit was also smashed out of the wall. He was embedded in the wall, soaked in filthy blood, and there was no good meat on his face, chest, and all the exposed skin. It was like a scene burned by fire, hideous and terrifying. Especially the face. Blade's original appearance could no longer be seen, like a terrible demon. Blade was embedded in the wall, vomiting blood in large mouthfuls. The blood flowed down his body and the wall. The violent impact and turbulence just now caused him serious damage to his body, especially the loss of a lot of blood. At the moment he was still able to maintain consciousness, which was considered that his will was strong and strong enough. But even so, Blade knew that he had lost his combat ability. If he moved, all the parts of his body that were washed and burned by the filthy blood would produce severe pain, constantly stimulating his brain nerves. Blade finally realized what kind of monsters those two people were. He also understood why the Book of Death recorded that the advent of the Blood God would bring great disasters to the world and the blood would flood the world. The Blood God at the ancestor level was not something he could contend with. Before, he was confident that although the Blood God was powerful, even if he was not the opponent, he should fight it. Even if he died, he would inflict heavy damage on the opponent. Now it seems that the difference in cognition is too great, and he can't fight at all. First of all, there is a huge gap in the foundation. Blade is still using katana, silver bullets, garlic seeds, and other things that restrain vampires as weapons. The fighting style is close combat, but what about Blood God? A single blood magic can kill Blade in a second. The gap in strength is like a chasm. However, Blade was not discouraged, because he saw a dazzling golden light like a scorching sun in the Eternal Night Temple shrouded in blood, burning all the filth and darkness. The gushing blood was evaporated. Xiao stood on the altar holding the cross sword tightly, and the Blood God with a heavy face was facing him. The altar under his feet was cracked due to the violent collision. The lines and the 12 stone pillars around were broken and smashed around. The violent vibration caused dust and gravel to fall from the ceiling and the surrounding walls. "You are very special, one of the most special humans I have ever seen. How did you get this power? Give? Borrow? Contract?" The blood-colored pupils of Blood God reflected the human boy opposite, who was wearing a black coat, a black shirt, and a round hat like a noble prince, and asked his own questions. As an ancestor-level Blood God, he has a long life, and his origin can be traced back to the ancient times of the earth. In other words, he is a real old monster who has witnessed the glory and even the twilight of the gods. Definitely, he was just a little Kayla in ancient times. He can't compare with the big guys like the ancient Hades, but he can live to this day, and his experience is not comparable to that of ordinary people. Originally summoned by the descendants, the Blood God came to the earth with great interest. Not only did he rule the earth, he also wanted to prepare to make some noise. As a result, as soon as he appeared, he encountered a monster that he had never seen before. The bright side is just a human being. The blood god can see that Bai Xiao is a pure human being, but he is much more powerful than a human being, especially the golden energy that blood can overcome him. He has never seen it among the gods. He did not smell the blood, the soul, the divinity that had an originary connection with those gods. This means that the man in front of him has no connection with the gods he has met. But what if there is no backer? Compared with the gods of ancient times, Bai Xiao is obviously a weakling, but he is young, very young, and this is a guarantee. Blood God couldn't tell how far Bai Xiao would have grown if he hadn't died midway. The key point is that he feels that he cannot kill this young monster unless he can cross dimensions and come to the earth in his true form, but that is simply unrealistic. Just say that he cannot violate the contract made by the ancient gods on the earth. Even if he violates it, he probably will not see it. Come to this human boy. He would have to be killed by other ancient gods across dimensions. Now he is just a ray of consciousness occupying this body, similar to the way demons and angels occupy the bodies of believers and come to the world. The original strength was severely suppressed. With this little strength, it didn't matter whether he could kill the opponent or not. He had to consider how he could escape from the opponent. Bai Xiao completely ignored the blood god's doubts. He leaned forward, squatted slightly with his feet in front and back, and stared at the blood god. He only had one idea: kill the blood god. Who the hell created this monster? When the blood god saw this situation, he immediately had a headache and cursed secretly. He was sure that this human boy definitely did not grow naturally. It is basically impossible for humans to have this kind of power. Human blood is too weak in all civilizations. They are the weakest group. There is no way it could be born naturally. It could only be the mouthpiece of some god he had never seen, or something beyond his imagination. So the blood god is scared. He doesn't want to continue fighting at all. The effort and the reward are completely out of proportion. He is not brainless and fighting without any benefit. He will suffer losses no matter how hard he fights. If he loses, the body he finally occupied is gone. If you win the fight, if you accidentally kill this human brat, maybe the god standing behind this brat will kill him across time and dimensions. Killing the spokesperson is equivalent to slapping the owner in the face, so it would be strange if he didn't get angry. If you can't afford to offend him, you can afford to hide. With a cold snort, Blood God prepared to use blood magic and run away. But Bai Xiao's eyes suddenly bloomed with brilliance, and the majestic spiritual power swept across like a storm, impacting the heart and will of the blood god unbridled. Chapter 48. An ancestor-level blood god, is his mind and will strong? Definitely strong. He is a strong man who can cross dimensions. He is one of the ancestors of vampires. He is also the original concept of vampires, even if he comes with just a ray of consciousness. But it's just a ray of consciousness. The defense line of mind and will brought by this ray of consciousness is not strong. At least in the face of Bai Xiao's surging and majestic spiritual storm, the complete spiritual barrier built by Blood God himself was broken down. Bai Xiao cannot control and read the other party's memory. I don't dare to take risks. After all, who knows how much material a character of this level will add to his spiritual world. Bai Xiao's most important result is to control the field. Terrifying psychic storms and psychic bombings ravaged the spiritual world of the Blood God. For a time, the Blood God was unable to escape through the original blood magic ability. Bai Xiao also took advantage of this opportunity to rush to the Blood God. The cross sword was infused with surging magic power, and the sword was rendered with golden magic power. Under the gorgeous golden color, there was enough energy to severely injure or even kill the Blood God. Blood God felt the danger, and he used his consciousness and strength to constantly calm the storm raging in his inner world, while controlling Dickon's body to fight Bai Xiao. Before Bai Xiao came, the Blood God stretched out his right hand, and blood spread from the skin of his right hand. The blood formed a long sword. At the critical moment, he stretched out the long sword to block himself. Bang! It was like the sound of metal collision exploding. The collision of gold and blood produced brilliant sparks. The sound of rumbling echoed throughout the Eternal Night Temple. Terrifying power burst out from the golden cross sword, and the two swords impacted the Blood God's body. The Blood God's body trembled crazily, and power spread around his body. The overbearing power impacted the ground, causing the entire altar, the Evernight Temple, and even the entire underground to shake violently. The walls cracked and collapsed, and horrifying cracks appeared on the ground. Large stones fell from the ceiling, and the ground was finally penetrated. Through the collapsed surface, the rolling dark clouds in the sky, and the bursts of thunder kept falling, and the bombing baptizing the temple of Evernight. It seemed that everything in the temple was going to be destroyed. Only by Xiao, who was on the altar, and the blood god ignored the thunder and falling boulders, and they were wrestling with each other. It's just that when gods fight, mortals suffer. On the Blade Warrior's side, he felt the walls and Evernight temple shaking, and a terrible danger emerged involuntarily. He knew that he could not stay here any longer, otherwise, he might be affected and die. Then he thought of the old guy Whistler in the stone chamber. He used his steely will to ignore the pain in his body. Fortunately, his physique was far superior to that of ordinary humans. His super self-healing ability allowed him to recover. At least half of his original hideous and ugly face had recovered. He exerted force and pulled himself out of the wall. He landed on the ground, staggered and almost fell to his knees. Stabilizing his body, he walked step by step along the corridor of the grotto towards the stone room. Just after walking out of the passage, there was another terrifying roar of explosions in the Evernight temple. It was obvious that the human boy and the blood god had already started a fierce battle. Blade was anxious, and the majestic impact of the air waves and pressure made him even more anxious, and he quickly accelerated. I walked to the stone room. Sure enough, Whistler fainted in front of the stone chamber, his forehead was stained with blood, and a stone was pressed on his body. Whistler must have sensed the danger and tried to leave the stone room with his old body, but it still affected him. Blade struggled to move the rocks away. He could hear Whistler's heart beating and breathing. It was not as energetic as a normal person, but at least he was still some distance away from death. With no expression on his face, he carried Whistler on his back, feeling the burning pain on his back as he quickened his pace and headed down the passage to the ground. We must get out of here as soon as possible. Boom! 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 The sound of explosions became louder and louder, and so did the vibrations. The entire underground world built by the vampires gradually began to collapse. Stone pillars, walls, and corridors were densely cracked, and large rocks fell from time to time. Blade relied on his superior physical fitness and perception of danger to dodge the falling rocks. After passing through passages one after another, Blade finally saw the only entrance. He quickly stepped up the steps that seemed to be crumbling and were about to break off. He walked step by step with Whistler on his back, and the roar of thunder in his ears became louder and louder. Just when the vibration amplitude of the surface world is about to reach its highest point, Blade then escaped to the ground with Whistler. He turned around and looked, and saw that a large area of tens of thousands of square meters of ground in front of him had sunk in. Especially in the center, he could see holes that were thousands of meters long. The thunder falling from the sky was like heavy rain pouring down. One look at it is frightening. Blade took a deep breath. His strength was almost exhausted due to the large amount of blood loss, but he still gritted his teeth and ran as far away as possible with Whistler on his back. Before he had run 1,000 meters, there was an earth-shattering roar and the sound of metal hitting behind him. What followed was a turbulent wave of air, which blew away Blade and the Whistler he was carrying. Chapter 49. Blade and Whistler were blown away for dozens of meters. Blade's back even hit a tree that was broken by the wind wave. The worst thing was that his body was pierced by a broken branch. The blood, which was not too much to begin with, flowed down from the wound. Blade, as a tough guy, still had no expression on his face. However, judging from the twitching of his eyes, he was about to burst out with a full collection of American swear words. Whistler was luckier and fell on the ground not far away. The soil on the ground was a little loose and soft, and there were some weeds, so he didn't receive much damage. The violent turbulence woke him up from fainting. After a slightly painful groan, he covered his forehead, and the music of thunder exploding, colliding with metal, and roaring kept echoing in his ears. It almost shattered his eardrums. Whistler shook his dizzy head, lay on the ground against the strong wind, and looked in the direction of the sound source with one hand in front of him. The direction his eyes were facing was the direction of the vampire underground world. It was pitch black in the evening, but fortunately the thunder that kept falling from the sky made this area much brighter. He faced the constant strong wind and air waves, and vaguely saw two figures in front of him colliding back and forth at a speed that ordinary people could not see clearly. Every time they collided, the sound of metal exploded, accompanied by the brilliant sparks. Every collision caused the ground to crack, the earth to shake, and also set off waves of turbulent air. Walter. The dazed Whistler finally woke up. In the basement, his last memory was seeing the gorgeous golden vortex engulfing thousands of vampires through the wall that Blade broke through, and then the blood god used the power brought by the blood magic to blow Whistler away. He almost sent him away on the spot. Realizing the danger, Whistler carried his damaged body and escaped with difficulty. Just when he reached the door of the stone room, he was knocked unconscious by the stones that fell due to the violent vibration. What a crazy world! Whistler sighed helplessly, and then he seemed to feel someone was paying attention to him. He turned his head and looked, his eyes suddenly widened. "Thank you for the gift, Blade. Are you okay?" Looking at Blade's miserable situation, Whistler was a little worried. Blade's face was full of indifference. The strong wind blew mercilessly on his body, making it impossible for him to pull himself out of the branch. But fortunately, he had a strong vitality and would not die for the time being. At most, he was a little miserable. He was burned all over, his internal organs and muscle tissues were necrotic, and he lost a lot of blood. It didn't matter if he had some fatal injuries. When the storm was over, he could find 2 blood bags and drink them. He was still the lively and notorious Daywalker, Blade Warrior. Seeing that Blade was miserable but not dead, Whistler was a little relieved. He and Blade looked forward, feeling bitter in their hearts, hoping that the human boy could kill the blood god as soon as possible, otherwise if it dragged on for a little longer, he and Blade might be buried here. In front, Bai Xiao and the blood god were fighting happily. Bai Xiao was now in an extremely contradictory state, both rational and excited. He was born with rational thinking, no matter what happened, he had a very clear mind to face the crisis. What was exciting was that the blood god gave him an equal battle. Yes, it was an equal battle. In fact, since Bai Xiao traveled through time and embarked on the road of killing people to become stronger, his combat power has increased day by day, and his growth rate is frighteningly fast. For this reason, he quickly transformed from hunting humans to vampires. Bai Xiao was not accurate in positioning his own strength from the beginning to the end, and it was very vague. He only measured himself based on some of his estimated data. But especially after he developed his mental power and magic power, his strength was no longer measured by basic physical data. He is like a Tyrannosaurus Rex cloned and placed in the primeval forest. As a top predator, he doesn't know where he stands in the food chain. He just knows that he is strong enough, but he has no idea how strong he is. He has never encountered an opponent of the same level. In order to keep a low profile, he has never exerted his full strength. This originally accumulated a kind of emotion in his heart, the desire for destruction. Just like a gunman who keeps buying guns and likes to shoot, but can't shoot for various reasons all year round, there will be an impulse in his heart to pick up the gun and pull the damn trigger regardless of everything. He wants to hear the beautiful gunshot, see the flames blooming from the muzzle, and see the bullet piercing any material and flesh. He even fantasizes that the bullet penetrates the head of an animal and the flesh of a human body. Bai Xiao is a bit like this, so the appearance of Blood God is not only to strengthen him as the essence of life, but also to give him a target to vent. After all, from an ordinary person who has enough power to destroy a city, but never vents it, he will instinctively feel dissatisfied, and even if he is not rational enough, his mind will be distorted. He needed to release the power he had acquired, and he wanted to measure what he could do. So his excitement was getting higher and higher. The strength of the blood god did not exceed his expectations. As the ancestor of vampires, even if only a wisp of consciousness descended and occupied Deacon's body, he still had the same combat power as him. Super strong power, speed, the blood magic that belonged to the blood clan, and the mastery of close combat, even if he was at a disadvantage in the beginning of the competition. It was only by relying on faster thinking, reaction nerves, speed, explosive power, etc. that he was not suppressed. He was frantically gaining experience and displaying skills in the battle. He was excited about his growth. Chapter 50. The thunder and thunder exploded from the sky and the earth, covering up the terrible scene that happened here. A terrifying and thick bolt of lightning from the sky struck the altar of the Eternal Night Temple, once again turning the already damaged Eternal Night Temple into ruins. The light flashed past, and on the ground in the distance, Bai Xiao held a golden cross sword and swept across it. Bang! Sparks flew everywhere, and the blood god who rushed over to attack was swept away by the huge force. The blood god's body rolled awkwardly in midair and flew several hundred meters upside down before stopping. Blood god saw the blood sword in his hand that was damaged by the inexplicable disgusting energy, and blood magic activated again to repair the sword body. Damn it, the bones and internal organs of blood god Deacon's body were shattered by the force of the collision. He could only use blood magic to repair himself again and again. It doesn't matter. The biggest headache for Blood God is the speed at which the opponent grows in the battle. From being suppressed at the beginning to being suppressed now. The key is that his inner world was ravaged by the other party with psychic storms and bombs, disrupting his thinking and heart, making him unable to use other blood magic and abilities, and could only use some of the most basic blood magic. If he wants to run away, he can only use blood magic. As a blood clan, he can originally transform into a bat form and escape through flight. But the opponent is always on guard against this. Whenever he has this idea, the opponent will rush over to suppress him like a mad dog, engaging in high-intensity melee combat. He has no other idea but to fight back, otherwise any flaw will cause the opponent to cut him down. Own head. The Blood God has seen how the opponent's energy can restrain the Blood Clan. Being decapitated is basically the same as death for him. Even if you want to cut off the tail to survive, you can't do it. It's really troublesome. Who is that evil guy who created such a monster with no weaknesses in all aspects? Blood God cursed secretly and swore he would never come to Earth again. The water here is too deep, and the ancient gods on every road are staring at this bigger world, and he can't control it at all. As he thought, Xiao rushed over again. Bang! The ground cracked, and the ground below was the surface world, causing the ground within 100 meters of the surrounding area to completely collapse. Xiao burst out with terrifying speed and rushed over with an even more terrifying momentum than before. The speed was much faster than before. The sudden increase in speed surprised Blood God. His expression changed and he wanted to fight back, but the opponent had already rushed in front of him. He twisted his body and exerted force. The golden rendered sword cut through the air and drew a beautiful arc. The golden trace passed by in midair and struck at the head of Blood God Dickon. Blood God had no choice but to block in front of him with his blood sword. Bang! But what the Blood God never expected was that the blood sword, which was harder than any metal in the world, shattered instantly in the collision. The hot and high temperatures condensed the blood into bloody fragments all over the sky. The sword body still did not stop. Crossed the Blood God's head. The perspective in front of Blood God's eyes was spinning. His head had been chopped off and was rolling in midair. The severed incision was extremely smooth. Xiao's head rolled in midair without stopping at all. The golden sword in his hand flew up and down. He swung the sword hundreds of times in 1 second, and his entire head was completely chopped into pieces. The whole scene is horrifying. Although the head was chopped into pieces, the headless corpse was still able to fight back. Holding the broken bloody sword, he aimed at Xiao's neck and stabbed it. Xiao grabbed it with his left hand, pressed it against the opponent's chest, and moved down. Pressure. Boom. The headless body was suppressed by this majestic energy and hit the ground heavily. The earth with a radius of 100 meters sunk, but it has not collapsed yet. Xiao looked down at the headless body whose chest was sunken by his tyrannical force but still wanted to fight back. Body, a golden light flashed from the eyes. The majestic magic power of the body was instilled in the left hand and exerted force again. With a boom, the ground collapsed, and he and his headless body were smashed toward the ground along with the collapsed gravel and dust. The moment he fell while pressing the headless body, the terrifying golden magic power erupted like a fountain. The soaring golden light pillars shot straight into the sky from the depths of the earth. The golden light pillars connecting heaven and earth pierced the sky, and the vortex of dark clouds surrounded the sky with thunder. A golden energy beam. The whole scene seemed like a miracle, making Blade and Whistler, who were passively watching the battle in the distance, widen their eyes in shock. Son of God, he is the Son of God. I saw a miracle happen. Whistler, an older generation of traditional Westerners, somewhat worships God, or God has a great influence on the Western world. He is not the most loyal believer, but now that he has witnessed an incredible scene with his own eyes, he instinctively one can only think of the Son of God. Because only the Son of God possesses the power to rival or even kill the ancestor of evil like the Blood God. And he felt the warmth from the soaring golden magic power, as if his severely damaged body had been healed a lot. Whistler didn't know if this was just an illusion, but he didn't care. His expression was full of excitement. Blade didn't expect that much. He just felt uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. The golden energy beam soaring into the sky was only more than 1,000 meters away from him. At close range, the few blood in his body seemed to be burning. He knew if he was really a purebred vampire. Now it is no different from shining directly on the sun, both will end up in ashes. It's a crazy world. Blade murmured, his face was illuminated by golden light. Despite the pain, he smiled, like a believer who was about to ascend to heaven and become an angel. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.